The midnight silence of Los Angeles was shattered by the shrill wail of a security alarm echoing through Nicholas Evans Reynolds' sprawling mansion. The sound pierced through the darkness, its urgency amplified by the emptiness of the grand estate. Nicholas's hands tightened around the steering wheel of his Aston Martin, his knuckles turning white as he accelerated through the iron gates, with Mary Bell Stewart beside him, her red miniskirt and heels a stark contrast to the leather interior of his luxury car. "Stay in the car," Nicholas commanded, his voice tight with tension. But Mary Bell, still processing their earlier encounter with her broken-down Beetle, wasn't one to take orders. "I'm coming with you," she declared, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. They entered the mansion together, their footsteps echoing off marble floors. The security panel showed no signs of forced entry, yet something felt wrong. Then they heard a sound that didn't belong in this empty house. A cry, no, multiple cries, faint but distinct, coming from the master bedroom upstairs. Nicholas drew in a sharp breath, his usual confidence wavering. The cries grew louder as they climbed the grand staircase, their hearts pounding in sync with each step. The master bedroom door stood slightly ajar, a sliver of moonlight cutting through the darkness. With trembling hands, Nicholas pushed the door open. The sight before them froze them in place. There, in the center of his king-sized bed, lay a carefully placed basket. Inside, 3 identical newborn babies wailed in perfect harmony, their tiny faces red with effort. "Oh my God," Mary Bell whispered, rushing forward instinctively. As she reached the basket, something caught her eye, a note, partially hidden beneath the soft blanket. Nicholas approached slowly, his face pale in the moonlight. The babies, sensing their presence, began to quiet. That's when Nicholas saw it, the unmistakable features that mirrored his own. The same nose, the same chin, even the same slight curl in their wispy hair. His legs gave way, and he sank onto the edge of the bed. Nicholas, Mary Bell's voice quivered as she held up the note and a stack of official-looking documents. "You need to see this." The security alarm continued its distant wail, but neither of them moved to silence it. In that moment their world had shifted irreversibly, and nothing else seemed to matter except the 3 tiny lives that had mysteriously appeared in their midst. Nicholas Evans Reynolds stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Los Angeles penthouse office, his reflection a stark reminder of how far he'd come from his humble beginnings. At 42, he cut an imposing figure in his tailored Tom Ford suit, his dark hair showing distinguished touches of grey at the temples. His steel blue eyes, often described as cold and calculating, held a depth of pain few ever noticed. The city sprawled beneath him like a glittering carpet, an empire he'd built through ruthless determination and countless sacrifices. Reynolds Enterprises, now a billion-dollar corporation, stood as a testament to his success. Yet success had come at a devastating price. 5 years ago, Nicholas had everything: a loving wife, Emma, and their 4-year-old son, James. Emma had been his high school sweetheart, the one person who knew him before wealth hardened his heart. She'd been his moral compass, always reminding him that true wealth lay in family and compassion, not in bank accounts and acquisitions. And the memory of that rainy Tuesday evening still haunted his dreams. While he sat in yet another board meeting, Emma and James were driving home from a parent-teacher conference. A drunk driver ran a red light, and in an instant his world shattered. By the time Nicholas reached the hospital, it was too late. His last words to Emma that morning had been about a missed dinner appointment. The tragedy transformed Nicholas. The warm, ambitious young man who once dreamed of changing the world became a cold, calculating businessman who trusted no one. He fired employees without remorse, cancelled contracts that didn't maximize profits, and earned a reputation as the Ice King of Los Angeles. His board of directors loved him, everyone else feared him. His massive mansion in Beverly Hills, filled with priceless art and the finest furnishings, remained eerily empty. He kept a smaller, more secure mansion on the outskirts of the city, a private retreat where he could escape the weight of his public persona. The staff had strict instructions never to enter without explicit permission, making it his true sanctuary. Nicholas's ruthlessness in business masked a deeper pain. Shortly after losing Emma and James, he was diagnosed with an aggressive autoimmune condition. The treatment was successful, but it left him unable to father children. For a man who had lost his only child, this final blow seemed like cruel cosmic justice. His parents, both gone now, had left him with one lasting legacy, the distinctive Reynolds family birthmark, a small crescent shape on the lower back that had marked their lineage for generations. It was a source of pride for his father, who often spoke of the Reynolds blood running strong. Now, Nicholas was the last of his line, that proud bloodline ending with him. Relationships after Emma were brief and superficial. Society women threw themselves at him, attracted by his wealth and power, but he saw through their facades. His heart remained locked away, preserved in the memory of a rainy Tuesday evening and a phone call that came too late. The only person who had stayed by his side through everything was James Thompson, his lawyer and oldest friend. James had watched Nicholas's transformation with growing concern, often attempting to breach the walls his friend had built around himself. "You can't punish yourself forever," Nicky would say, but Nicholas would merely turn back to his work, driving himself harder, as if success could fill the void in his soul. His employees called him the machine behind his back, marveling at his tireless work ethic and unfailing attention to detail. What they didn't see were the sleepless nights spent walking the empty halls of his mansion, looking at photos of Emma and James, wondering how different life might have been. The media painted him as a modern-day Midas, everything he touched turning to gold. Fortune magazine dubbed him the Oracle of Los Angeles for his uncanny ability to turn failing companies into profitable enterprises. Yet each success felt hollow, each achievement meaningless in the face of what he'd lost. His morning routine never varied: up at 5 a.m., an hour in his private gym, breakfast alone while reviewing market reports, then into the office by 7:30. His evening routine was equally predictable: working until 9 p.m., a solitary dinner, then more work until exhaustion forced him to sleep. Weekends were no different, except he worked from his home office instead of the corporate tower. The only unpredictable element in his life was his habit of driving late at night, when sleep proved elusive. Behind the wheel of his Aston Martin, he could briefly outrun his demons, the powerful engine drowning out the echoes of his past. These drives often took him past Emma's favorite places: the small Italian restaurant where they had their first date, the park where James took his first steps, the beach where they spent their last happy summer together. Now, standing in his office on this particular morning, Nicholas felt the familiar emptiness threatening to overwhelm him. Another acquisition was complete, another company added to his empire, yet the victory tasted like ashes in his mouth. The board meeting would start in 10 minutes, and he would once again don the mask of the ruthless businessman, hiding the broken man beneath. Little did he know that fate was about to throw him a curved ball, in the form of a beautiful woman with a broken-down beetle and a spirit that couldn't be bought or intimidated. His carefully constructed world was about to be turned upside down, challenging everything he thought he knew about love, family, and what truly matters in life. Mary Bell Stewart stood in front of the cracked mirror in her tiny apartment's bathroom, adjusting the red miniskirt she'd carefully altered for her modeling interview. At 28, she possessed a natural beauty that needed no enhancement: long chestnut hair, emerald green eyes, and a grace that came from years of hardship rather than finishing school. The early morning light filtering through the window highlighted the determination in her features, a look that had become her trademark. The apartment's walls were thin enough to carry the sound of her younger sister Sarah's labored breathing from the next room. Sarah, just 19, battled a rare heart condition that consumed most of Mary Bell's waitressing earnings. Their parents' insurance had helped initially, But after the tragic car accident that claimed their lives 2 years ago, the financial burden fell entirely on Mary Bell's shoulders. The old white Volkswagen Beetle parked outside was more than just transportation, it was the last tangible connection to her parents. Her father had lovingly maintained it for years, teaching Mary Bell everything he knew about cars in the process. "A car is like life, sweetheart," he'd say. "It's not about how shiny it looks on the outside, but how much love you put into keeping it running now. Despite its fading paint and occasional sputters, she couldn't bear to part with it." Her grandfather's wisdom echoed in her thoughts daily, his sayings serving as guideposts through life's challenges. Before passing away, he'd filled a leather-bound notebook with his observations about life, love, and perseverance. "Beauty without purpose is like a garden without flowers" was one of his favorites, a phrase Mary Bell held close to her heart as she pursued her modeling dreams. The walls of her bedroom were covered with torn-out magazine pages, not of fashion spreads, but of charity galas and fundraising events. Her modeling ambitions weren't born of vanity. She dreamed of becoming successful enough to establish a foundation for families struggling with medical bills. The rejection letters from agencies were numerous, but each no only strengthened her resolve. Between shifts at Joe's Diner, Mary Bell took online courses in business management. A laptop, a refurbished model bought from a pawn shop, sat on a makeshift desk fashioned from old milk crates and a wooden board. The calendar beside it was marked with Sarah's medical appointments, modeling casting calls, and payment due dates, a complex juggling act that left little room for error. The diner's regular customers adored her, not just for her stunning looks, but for her genuine warmth and resilient spirit. She remembered everyone's usual orders, their children's names, their stories. Even on her hardest days, when Sarah's medical bills seemed insurmountable, she maintained her grandfather's philosophy that a smile given freely is worth more than gold held tightly. Her small closet contained a carefully curated collection of second-hand designer clothes, each piece strategically purchased from thrift stores and meticulously maintained. She'd learned to spot quality amid the racks, and her skilled hands could transform dated pieces into modern fashion statements. The red miniskirt she wore today was originally a dress she'd reconstructed, a testament to her resourcefulness. The local community had become her extended family. Mrs. Rodriguez from the apartment next door often watched Sarah during Mary Bell's evening shifts, refusing any payment beyond home-cooked meals. The mechanic down the street, Old Pete, kept the Beetle running with discounted repairs and payment plans, touched by Mary Bell's determination to preserve her father's legacy. Sarah's illness had taught Mary Bell the true meaning of strength. She watched her sister face each day with unwavering courage, never complaining about the limitations her condition imposed. "You're the real model," Mary Bell would tell her, earning one of Sarah's radiant smiles that made all the struggles worthwhile. The modeling agency's consistent feedback was that she was too old to start a career, but Mary Bell knew age was just another number to overcome. Her grandfather's voice would whisper in her mind, "Time doesn't measure worth, character does." She believed her life experiences would make her a more compelling model, someone who could represent beauty with substance. But her parents' accident had occurred on a night much like any other. They were returning from one of Sarah's doctor appointments when a truck lost control on the wet highway. Mary Bell had been at the diner, serving coffee and planning her next modeling application. The police officer who came to deliver the news found her still wearing her apron, her world splitting apart even as she maintained her composure for her customers' sake. The inheritance had been modest. The house had to be sold to cover medical bills, leaving only the Beetle and a box of family photos. Mary Bell had moved herself and Sarah into the small apartment, transforming the larger bedroom into a comfortable space for her sister's medical equipment. Her own room was barely large enough for a twin bed, but she made it cozy with fairy lights and her grandfather's framed sayings. Every morning she woke before dawn to help Sarah with her exercises, prepare her medications, and ensure she was comfortable before heading to her morning shift at the diner. Between shifts, she would rush to modeling casting calls, changing outfits in public restrooms and applying makeup on bus rides across the city. Tonight's interview at Fantasy magazine was her biggest opportunity yet. The prestigious publication was known for featuring models who defied industry standards, and Mary Bell had spent weeks preparing for this chance. She'd researched the magazine's history, studied their previous covers, and practiced her walk until her feet ached. As she gave herself one final look in the mirror, she touched the small heart-shaped locket containing her parents' photos. "Today's the day," she whispered, smoothing down her skirt. "Beauty with purpose, that's what I'll show them." Little did she know that a broken-down beetle and an arrogant millionaire were about to change the course of her life forever. James Thompson stood in his corner office at Thompson Legal Partners, adjusting his bow tie, a habit he'd maintained since his first case 25 years ago. At 55, he was more than just Nicholas Reynolds' lawyer. He was the closest thing to family the millionaire had left. His silver hair and distinguished appearance earned him respect in courtrooms, but it was his unwavering integrity that made him legendary in legal circles. For 15 years, he had watched Nicholas transform from an idealistic young entrepreneur into the cold businessman he was today. He was there at Emma and James' funeral, supporting his friend when Nicholas could barely stand. "The law can protect your assets," he'd told Nicholas then, "but it can't protect your heart if you lock it away completely." Despite his own successful career, James kept a photo of Nicholas's family on his desk, a reminder of what his friend had lost and what he hoped he might find again. His wife Margaret often invited Nicholas for Sunday dinners, refusing to let him isolate himself completely. "That boy needs more than legal advice," she'd say, setting an extra place at their table even when Nicholas didn't show. Detective Michael Anderson of the Los Angeles Police Department commanded respect with his 20 years of experience and unflinching dedication to justice. His office walls were covered with commendations, but it was the thank you letters from families he'd helped that he valued most. At 48, his weathered face and calculating brown eyes had seen the best and worst of humanity. Anderson had investigated the accident that killed Nicholas's family, and the memory of delivering that news still haunted him. When cases involving children crossed his desk, he handled them with particular care, remembering the broken look in Nicholas's eyes that rainy night. His partner often joked that Anderson treated each case like a personal mission, but that dedication had earned him the highest solve rate in the department. The detective's own family life, a loving wife and 3 teenage daughters, made him especially sensitive to cases involving family separation. His eldest daughter, Katie, was studying law, inspired by the stories her father brought home about justice and redemption. The truth isn't always in the evidence, he would tell her. Sometimes it's in the silence between the facts. Dr. Elizabeth Parker, director of Pure Heart Medical Center, carried herself with the confidence of someone who had fought her way to the top of her profession. At 46, her reputation for both medical excellence and ethical practice made her one of the most respected physicians in Los Angeles. Her steel gray hair was always perfectly styled, matching her precise approach to everything in life. She had been Nicholas's primary physician during his autoimmune treatment, witnessing firsthand the toll it took on him physically and emotionally. The hospital board praised her clinical detachment, but in private moments, she struggled with the weight of her patients' stories. Her office held a small garden where she would often retreat to collect her thoughts between difficult cases. The community surrounding Mary Bell formed a crucial support network. Mrs. Sofia Rodriguez, a 65-year-old retired nurse, became a surrogate mother figure to both Stewart sisters. Her small apartment smelled perpetually of fresh-baked cookies and strong coffee, and her door was always open to those in need. "Family isn't about blood," she would say in her gentle Spanish accent. "It's about who stays when everyone else walks away." Old Pete Martinez, the mechanic who kept Mary Bell's Beetle running, was a Vietnam veteran with hands that could fix anything mechanical and a heart that couldn't turn away someone in need. His auto shop, Martinez Motors, wasn't much to look at, but his reputation for honest work and fair prices made him a neighborhood institution. The photos of cars he'd saved covered his office walls, each with its own story of helping someone in need. The diner where Mary Bell worked was owned by Joe Henderson, a gruff exterior hiding a generous soul. He'd given Mary Bell flexible hours when Sarah's condition worsened, and quietly added extra tips to her paycheck during particularly difficult months. His wife Betty would send home-cooked meals accidentally made in too large portions, ensuring the Stewart sisters always had food in their refrigerator. The Reynolds Enterprises employees, particularly those who had worked there since before Emma's death, remembered a different Nicholas. Patricia Wilson, his executive assistant for 15 years, kept a photo of the company's first Christmas party tucked in her desk drawer, a reminder of when her boss's smile reached his eyes. She maintained her loyal dedication, hoping that someday that version of Nicholas would return. The local media played their part, particularly Diana Chen, a reporter for the Los Angeles Tribune, who had covered Nicholas's rise to success and subsequent transformation. Her articles painted a complex portrait of a man who built an empire while losing his soul. Her integrity and refusal to sensationalize stories made her respected by both her subjects and readers. Father Michael O'Connor of St. Patrick's Church, where the Reynolds family once attended services, kept Nicholas in his prayers. The priest had officiated Emma and James's funeral and still maintained their names in the parish prayer book. Every Sunday he would glance at the pew where the family used to sit, remembering the times when Nicholas would lift little James onto his shoulders after Mass. The network of former employees Nicholas had fired over the years formed an unexpected community. Rather than harboring bitterness, many understood the pain behind their former boss's actions. Mark Stevens, a former VP who was dismissed during Nicholas's darkest period, would later become a key ally, proving that compassion could survive even the harshest treatment. Sarah's doctors at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, particularly Dr. David Cohen, became invested in not just her treatment but in the sisters' well-being. Dr. Cohen would often schedule Sarah's appointments at times that wouldn't conflict with Mary Bell's work shifts, understanding the delicate balance she maintained. Together, these supporting characters formed a tapestry of lives interconnected by circumstance, choice, and destiny. Each would play a crucial role in the unfolding drama, their individual actions and decisions weaving together to create a story of redemption, love, and the power of community. The Los Angeles sun beat down mercilessly on the outskirts of the city, where Mary Bell Stewart found herself stranded with her beloved white Volkswagen Beetle. Sweat trickled down her back as she pushed against the car's bumper, her red miniskirt and platform heels hardly ideal for automotive emergencies. The old car groaned in protest, barely moving an inch despite her determined efforts. "Come on. You can do this," she muttered, her grandfather's voice echoing in her head. "Persistence beats resistance, my dear." The modeling interview at Fantasy magazine, her biggest opportunity yet, was scheduled in 2 hours, and here she was, stuck on a deserted stretch of road with a car that chose the worst possible moment to break down. The sound of an approaching vehicle made her straighten up, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. The sleek Aston Martin Vantage that purred to a stop beside her was worth more than she'd make in 10 years of waitressing. The driver's window slid down with an electric hum, revealing Nicholas Evans Reynolds, though Mary Bell didn't yet know the identity of the impeccably dressed man with the condescending smirk. "I think some spinach could turn you into Popeye," he quipped, his designer sunglasses hiding his eyes but not his amusement at her situation. The comment stung, especially given her already frustrated state. Mary Bell straightened to her full height, her emerald eyes flashing. "Thanks for the input, Car of the Year. Are you here to offer motivation or just show off while I burn calories?" Something in her response made Nicholas pause. Most people either cowered or fawned in his presence. They didn't bite back with wit and dignity while stranded on a roadside. He found himself pulling over and stepping out of his car, his crisp white shirt a stark contrast to her disheveled appearance. "Don't worry," he said, maintaining his superior tone. "Today's your lucky day. I'm here to save you, since clearly mechanics aren't your strong suit." As a woman, of course, he moved toward the Beetle's hood with exaggerated confidence. Mary Bell crossed her arms. Her grandfather's words surfacing again: "Help that humiliates isn't help at all. It's just an excuse to feed someone's ego." She watched as Nicholas fiddled with the engine, his certainty quickly turning to confusion as he encountered the Beetle's aged machinery. The resulting small explosion and cloud of black smoke that erupted from the engine perfectly punctuated his failure. Nicholas jumped back, his designer shirt now smudged with grease and his pride visibly wounded. The look of shock on his face was almost comical. "Oh my God, what did you just do?" Mary Bell exclaimed, though she couldn't entirely hide her satisfaction at his humbling moment. "You know what my grandpa used to say? Sometimes those who underestimate others end up proving their own shortcomings." Nicholas struggled to maintain his composure, waving away the smoke with as much dignity as he could muster. "Not my fault you're driving this clunker. If you had a car like mine, this would never happen." The words sounded hollow even to his own ears. "All right, Mr. Know-It-All," Mary Bell said, her voice carrying both irritation and resignation. "Since you just blew up my Beetle, I guess that makes me your responsibility out here in the middle of nowhere. So figure it out." Something about her directness, her refusal to be intimidated by his wealth or status, sparked an unfamiliar feeling in Nicholas. He found himself offering her a ride, though he made it clear he wasn't going to open the door for her petty attempt to maintain some semblance of control over the situation. As they walked to his car, Mary Bell's heels clicking confidently on the pavement, Nicholas couldn't help but glance back at the smoking Beetle. The car seemed to mock him, a humble vehicle that had exposed the limits of his assumed superiority. "So where am I taking you, oh damsel in distress?" he asked with forced sarcasm, trying to regain his footing in their verbal sparring. "Or should I drop you off somewhere more fitting, maybe a street where rocking a miniskirt and heels works wonders?" The look Mary Bell gave him could have cut through steel. "My job interview, Mr. Know-It-All," she replied with quiet dignity. The surprise on his face when she revealed she was a model candidate was evident, even behind his expensive sunglasses. Their drive began in tense silence, but something had shifted in their dynamic. Nicholas found himself stealing glances at her profile, intrigued by the way she held herself with such grace despite his attempts to diminish her. Mary Bell, for her part, noticed the brief moments when his arrogant mask slipped, revealing glimpses of something deeper. Neither could have known that this chance encounter, this seemingly random collision of their worlds, would set in motion events that would change both their lives forever. As they drove toward the city, the smoking Beetle growing smaller in the rearview mirror, fate was already weaving its intricate web around them. The shrill alarm piercing through Nicholas's mansion shattered the uneasy calm that had settled between him and Mary Bell during their drive. The security notification on his phone showed unauthorized entry, the alert's red warning light pulsing ominously on the screen. His private sanctuary, the one place he maintained complete control, had been breached. "Stay in the car," Nicholas ordered instinctively, his businessman's facade cracking slightly to reveal genuine concern. But Mary Bell, still processing the events that had led her here, felt an inexplicable need to stay with him. Perhaps it was the momentary vulnerability she'd glimpsed beneath his arrogant exterior. Or maybe her grandfather's words about facing challenges together rang in her ears. "I'm coming with you," she stated firmly, her voice brooking no argument. "You didn't leave me stranded on the road. I'm not leaving you to face whatever's in there alone." The look of surprise that crossed Nicholas's face suggested few people in his life showed such loyalty without obvious personal gain. They entered the mansion together, the security keypad casting an eerie blue glow across their faces as Nicholas entered his code. The grand foyer, with its marble floors and crystal chandelier, echoed their footsteps, despite their attempts at stealth. The house felt alive with tension, every shadow potentially concealing the source of the alarm's trigger. Nicholas moved with the cautious precision of someone protecting their territory, while Mary Bell followed close behind, her heels now clutched in her hands to move silently. The security panel on the wall showed multiple sensors activated on the upper floor, specifically in the master bedroom suite. Then they heard it, a sound so unexpected in this fortress of solitude that both froze mid-step. A cry, faint but distinct, floated down from above. Not the cry of an adult in distress, but the unmistakable wail of a baby. And not just one cry, but multiple tiny voices joined in a chorus of need. "That's impossible," Nicholas whispered, his composed demeanor cracking further. No children had entered this house since James's death. The sound pierced his carefully constructed walls, stirring memories he'd fought to suppress. They ascended the grand staircase, the cries growing louder with each step. Mary Bell noticed Nicholas's hand trembling slightly as he reached for the master bedroom door handle. The heavy door swung open silently on well-oiled hinges, revealing a scene that would forever change their lives. In the center of the massive bed, bathed in moonlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, sat a carefully placed basket. Inside, 3 identical newborn babies squirmed and cried, their tiny faces red with effort. The sight struck Nicholas like a physical blow, sending him staggering back a step. Mary Bell moved forward instinctively, her maternal instincts overriding any hesitation. As she approached the basket, she gasped softly. The babies were beautiful, perfect, and unmistakably bore Nicholas's features. The same strong jaw, the same nose, even the same slight curl in their sparse hair. "Nicholas," she called softly, her voice trembling as she noticed something else. Tucked beneath the soft blanket was an envelope, thick with documents. The babies quieted as she lifted it, their cries subsiding to soft whimpers as if they sensed the gravity of the moment. Nicholas approached slowly, his face pale in the moonlight. His eyes couldn't seem to leave the tiny faces looking up at him. Without warning, one of the babies grabbed his finger when he reached toward them, and the simple gesture seemed to pierce straight through his carefully maintained facade. "They look exactly like you," Mary Bell observed quietly, watching as Nicholas struggled to process the situation. The security alarm continued its distant wail, but it seemed irrelevant now, a background noise to the profound moment unfolding in the room. As Mary Bell opened the envelope, documents spilled out onto the bed. Birth certificates, medical records, and a handwritten note fell across the expensive duvet. The note was brief but devastating in its implications. "They belong with their father. I can't keep them. Please give them the life they deserve." Nicholas sank onto the edge of the bed, his legs no longer able to support him. The weight of the moment, the implications of these 3 tiny lives suddenly thrust into his world, threatened to overwhelm him. His carefully controlled life, his fortress of solitude, had been invaded in the most unexpected and profound way possible. Mary Bell watched as various emotions played across his face: shock, confusion, fear, and something else, something that looked surprisingly like hope. She remembered her grandfather's words about life's greatest challenges often being disguised blessings, and wondered if they were witnessing such a moment. One of the babies began to fuss again, and without thinking, Mary Bell lifted the child into her arms. The natural way she cradled the infant, swaying gently to soothe its cries, stirred something in Nicholas. For a brief moment he saw Emma in the gesture, the same instinctive nurturing that his late wife had possessed. "What am I supposed to do?" he whispered, more to himself than to Mary Bell. The question seemed to encompass more than just the immediate situation. It was the cry of a man whose carefully constructed world had just been upended. Mary Bell's response was simple but profound. "Right now, these babies need us. Everything else can wait." She held out the child in her arms to Nicholas, who hesitated before accepting the tiny bundle. The moment the baby settled against his chest, something shifted in his expression, as if a long, frozen part of his heart had begun to thaw. The security system finally fell silent, plunging the room into a quiet broken only by the soft sounds of the infants. In that stillness, both Nicholas and Mary Bell sensed that their lives had irrevocably changed. Whatever came next, they were now bound together by this extraordinary circumstance. The morning sun had barely risen when James Thompson's car pulled into the circular driveway of Nicholas's mansion. The veteran lawyer moved with urgent purpose, his bow tie slightly askew, a telling sign of the hasty departure from his morning routine. The security footage Nicholas had sent him at dawn left no room for delay. Inside, he found Nicholas and Mary Bell in the living room, surrounded by baby supplies hastily purchased through an all-night delivery service. The 3 infants were finally sleeping in a portable crib, their peaceful faces a stark contrast to the tension filling the room. "We need to handle this carefully," Nick James began, his voice low to avoid waking the babies. "The legal implications here are complex." He spread documents across the coffee table, decades of legal experience evident in his methodical approach. The first complication arrived with Detective Michael Anderson, who appeared at the mansion within hours of receiving the report. His weathered face remained professionally neutral as he surveyed the scene, but his eyes softened at the sight of the sleeping infants. "Mr. Reynolds," Anderson began, notebook in hand, "I need to understand exactly what happened here. Breaking and entering, abandoned infants, this isn't a simple case." His gaze moved between Nicholas and Mary Bell, assessing their unlikely partnership. Before Nicholas could respond, the situation complicated further with the arrival of Child Protective Services. Sandra Martinez, a veteran social worker with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, entered with 2 colleagues. The weight of protocol hung heavy in her voice as she spoke. "I understand this is difficult," she began, "but we have procedures that must be followed. These children need to be placed in temporary state custody until parentage can be established and their safety assured." The words hit Nicholas like physical blows. "They're safe here," he argued, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Look at them, they're clearly mine. The resemblance." "Resemblance isn't enough, Mr. Reynolds," Sandra replied gently. "We need DNA testing, background checks, home studies. These children's welfare has to be our primary concern." Mary Bell, who had been quietly observing, stepped forward. "These babies haven't left this room since we found them. They're comfortable, they're cared for. Surely there's a way to ensure their safety without traumatizing them." James Thompson intervened, his legal mind already formulating strategies. "We can file for emergency temporary custody while expediting the DNA testing. Mr. Reynolds has the resources to provide round-the-clock care, and his background is beyond reproach." The media somehow caught wind of the situation, and by midday news vans had begun gathering outside the mansion's gates. Diana Chen from the Los Angeles Tribune was already crafting a headline: "Tech Tycoon's Mysterious Midnight Delivery, 3 Babies Left at Billionaire's Door." Patricia Wilson, Nicholas's executive assistant, was working overtime to manage the corporate fallout. Shareholders were nervous, board members were calling emergency meetings, and competitors were watching for any sign of weakness in the Reynolds empire. "The board is concerned about stability," Patricia reported during a brief phone call. "They're worried this situation could affect your judgment, your focus on the company." Inside the mansion, Nicholas paced like a caged lion as James argued with CPS officials. Mary Bell had taken charge of the practical aspects, feeding, changing, and soothing the infants with a natural grace that made Nicholas's heart ache with memories of Emma. "We can't let them take the babies," Nicholas said to James during a private moment. "I've lost one family. I can't lose another one." The crack in his voice revealed the depth of emotion behind his usually controlled exterior. The situation reached a crescendo when Sandra Martinez regretfully announced that protocol required immediate removal of the infants to a state facility. "Until we have court orders saying otherwise, we have no choice," she explained. Mary Bell watched in anguish as Nicholas's face transformed from desperate pleading to stone-cold determination. "James," he commanded, "whatever it takes. Use every legal resource we have. These are my children, and I will not lose them." Detective Anderson, observing the scene, made notes in his weathered notebook. Years of experience told him there was more to this story: the security footage, the precise timing, the carefully prepared documents left with the babies. This wasn't a random abandonment, it was orchestrated. As the day progressed, the mansion became a battlefield of competing interests. Legal documents flew back and forth, phone calls were made to judges and officials, and emergency hearings were scheduled. Nicholas's wealth and influence collided with bureaucratic requirements and child protection laws. The media circus outside grew larger, with speculation running wild. Some painted Nicholas as a victim of an elaborate scheme, others suggested a secret scandal being exposed. Through it all, Nicholas remained focused on one goal: keeping the babies he already couldn't imagine living without. By evening, James had secured a temporary compromise. The babies would remain in the mansion under supervision of a court-appointed monitor, with daily visits from CPS. DNA testing would begin immediately, and a full investigation would proceed into the circumstances of their appearance. As night fell, Mary Bell found Nicholas standing in the nursery, watching the sleeping infants. "My grandfather used to say that sometimes the biggest blessings come disguised as our greatest challenges," she offered softly. Nicholas turned to her, his face showing the wear of the day's battles. "Stay," he said simply. "I can't do this alone." The request carried more vulnerability than any words he'd spoken since Emma's death. The legal storm was just beginning, but in that quiet moment, watching over 3 sleeping babies who had appeared so mysteriously in their lives, both Nicholas and Mary Bell felt a certainty that transcended legal documents and court orders. These children belonged here, with them, and they would fight whatever battles necessary to keep their newfound family together. The moonlight filtered through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows across the nursery, where Nicholas sat in a plush armchair, watching the sleeping triplets. It had been 3 days since their mysterious arrival, and the constant presence of the court-appointed monitor made the house feel more like a supervised facility than a home. Mary Bell entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She'd barely left the mansion since that first night, her modeling interview at Fantasy magazine long forgotten in the whirlwind of events. She handed Nicholas a cup and settled into the adjacent chair, her presence having become a source of unexpected comfort. "You know," Nicholas began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I never told anyone why I became so." Cold, he paused, struggling with words he hadn't spoken in years. 5 years ago I had everything. A wife, Emma. A son, James. They were my world. Mary Bell remained silent, instinctively sensing the weight of the moment. The sleeping baby's soft breathing provided a gentle backdrop to Nicholas's confession. "I was in a board meeting when it happened. Some acquisition that seemed so important at the time." His hands tightened around the coffee cup. "A drunk driver ran a red light. By the time I got to the hospital..." His voice cracked, and he took a moment to compose himself. "My last words to Emma were about a missed dinner appointment." The pain in his voice resonated deeply with Mary Bell, who knew all too well the ache of sudden loss. She reached out and placed her hand over his, a simple gesture of understanding. "After that I threw myself into work, built the empire everyone knows today. But each success felt hollow." Nicholas looked at the triplets, his eyes softening. "Then the autoimmune condition hit. The treatments were successful, but they left me unable to have children. It seemed like a cruel joke losing my family and then losing the ability to ever have another one." The revelation hung heavy in the air. Mary Bell thought of her own losses, the parallels in their stories striking her deeply. "I understand more than you know," she said softly. 2 years ago I lost my parents the same way: a car accident. I was at the diner serving coffee and planning my next modeling audition when the police came." Nicholas turned to her, seeing her in a new light. The strength he'd initially mistaken for defiance now revealed itself as something deeper, the resilience of someone who had faced similar pain. "Sarah, my sister Maribel continued, she has a heart condition. The medical bills. That's why I keep trying for modeling jobs. The money from waiting tables barely covers her medications," she smiled sadly. "The beetle you helped destroy? It was my dad's. The last thing I have of him." Nicholas felt shame wash over him, remembering his earlier mockery of her car. "I'm sorry," he said, the words carrying weight beyond the car incident. "I've become everything I once despised, someone who measures worth by wealth." The babies stirred slightly, and both adults instinctively leaned forward, checking on them. The natural synchronization of their movements spoke to something evolving between them, a connection built on shared understanding and pain. My grandfather, Maribel said, adjusting a baby's blanket, he always said that our greatest wounds can become our greatest gifts, if we let them teach us rather than break us. Nicholas absorbed her words, watching how tenderly she cared for the infants. "These babies," he said slowly, "they're forcing me to feel again. To remember what it was like before I built all these walls. And they're giving me a chance to help create the kind of family I lost," Maribel added softly. "Even if it's just temporary, just until all this legal mess is sorted out." The monitor assigned by the court shifted in her chair by the door, trying to appear unobtrusive while maintaining her watchful presence. The constant supervision was a reminder of how precarious their situation remained. "You know," Nicholas said, a hint of his old determination creeping into his voice, "I'm going to fight for them. Not just with money or lawyers, but with everything I have. They deserve a real family, not some institutional arrangement." Maribel nodded, understanding completely. "And I'll help you. These babies need more than just legal protection. They need love, stability, and people who put them first." As dawn began to paint the sky in soft pastels, they sat together in comfortable silence, each processing the revelations of the night. The barriers between them had crumbled, replaced by a foundation of shared understanding and purpose. Outside the nursery windows, the media crews maintained their vigil, their cameras and speculation unable to capture the profound transformation taking place within the mansion's walls. Two broken people, brought together by circumstance, were beginning to heal each other through their shared commitment to 3 innocent lives. "Your grandfather," Nicholas said finally, "he sounds like a wise man. What would he say about all this?" Maribel smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He'd say that sometimes the family we need finds us in the most unexpected ways, and that love isn't about who shares our blood, but who shares our heart." As the first rays of sunlight touched the sleeping babies' faces, both Nicholas and Maribel felt something shift in their understanding of family, healing, and hope. The road ahead would be challenging, but they would face it together, united by their shared pain and their growing determination to create something beautiful from the ashes of their past losses. The morning calm at Nicholas's mansion was shattered by the arrival of an expensive black SUV with tinted windows. A woman stepped out, her designer outfit and confident stride suggesting both wealth and purpose. Lisa Montgomery, accompanied by her high-powered attorney, demanded immediate entrance, claiming to be the triplets' mother. James Thompson arrived minutes later, his bow tie perfectly straight, a sign he was ready for battle. The tension in the grand living room was palpable as Lisa sat across from Nicholas and Maribel, her practiced tears falling with theatrical precision. "Those are my babies," Lisa declared, her voice wavering for effect. "I made a terrible mistake leaving them here. I was emotional, not thinking clearly. I want them back." Her attorney, Richard Blake, produced a folder of documents with flourish. Nicholas's face had turned to stone, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair. Maribel watched the scene unfold, her heart racing as she noticed the babies beginning to stir in their bassinet nearby. "Mrs. Montgomery," James began carefully, "you claim these children are yours, yet the documentation left with them tells a very different story. Would you care to explain this discrepancy?" Lisa's response was immediate and calculated. I was desperate, confused. But they're mine. And if Mr. Reynolds doesn't cooperate, we're prepared to make this very public. How would your shareholders react to headlines about you stealing a mother's children? The threat hung in the air like poison. Detective Anderson, who had arrived moments after the Montgomerys, stood quietly in the corner, his experienced eyes missing nothing. Something about Lisa's story didn't add up, and he could sense it. "We have security footage of the night the babies were left," Nicholas stated, his voice controlled but dangerous. "The woman in that footage doesn't match your height or build, Mrs. Montgomery." Lisa's composure cracked slightly before she recovered. "I had help. Someone who agreed to deliver them for me. I was emotionally unable to do it myself." Mary Bell, who had remained silent, suddenly spoke up. "The babies have a distinctive birthmark, the Reynolds family mark. Can you describe it?" Her question, simple but devastating, caused Lisa to pale visibly. The confrontation was interrupted by the arrival of Sandra Martinez from CPS, accompanied by 2 police officers. The situation had escalated beyond a simple custody dispute. "Given these new claims," Sandra announced, "we have no choice but to remove the infants to state custody until this matter is resolved." The words fell like hammers in the quiet room. Nicholas stood abruptly, his voice tight with controlled fury. "These children haven't left this house since they arrived. They're thriving, they're bonded to us. You can't just—" "Mr. Reynolds," Sandra cut in gently but firmly, "we have protocols we must follow. With competing custody claims, the children's safety must come first." Mary Bell moved to the bassinet, her protective instincts flaring. "They've just been fed. They need their nap. Please, at least let them sleep." Lisa Montgomery saw her opportunity. "I'm their mother. I should be the one caring for them." Her performance was perfect, but something in her eyes betrayed her true intentions. Detective Anderson chose that moment to step forward. "Mrs. Montgomery, would you mind accompanying me to the station? We have some questions about the night the babies were left here." The next few hours passed in a blur of legal arguments, tears, and documentation. James Thompson worked tirelessly, filing emergency motions and calling in favors from judges he'd known for decades. By evening, a temporary compromise was reached. The babies would remain at the mansion under increased supervision, with both Nicholas and Lisa Montgomery prohibited from removing them from the premises. DNA testing was ordered for all parties. As Lisa and her attorney left, she paused at the door. "You can't win this, Mr. Reynolds. A mother's rights always come first. But perhaps we could." Discuss terms. Her implication was clear. This was about money, not motherhood. Nicholas's response was cold and precise. "Mrs. Montgomery, if these are truly your children, no amount of money would make you want to leave them. Remember that." After everyone had gone, leaving only the court-appointed monitors, Nicholas and Mary Bell sat exhausted in the nursery. The babies slept peacefully, unaware of the storm raging around them. "She's lying," Mary Bell said softly, her hand gently stroking one baby's back. "I saw it in her eyes when she looked at them. There was no love there, only calculation." Nicholas nodded, his face drawn with worry. "But she's right about one thing: the media will have a field day with this. Reynolds Enterprises stock is already dropping. The board is getting nervous." "What are you going to do?" Mary Bell asked, though she already knew the answer. "Whatever it takes," Nicholas replied, his voice firm. "I lost one family to circumstances beyond my control. I won't lose another one to someone's greed." As night fell, they received word that Detective Anderson had made some interesting discoveries about Lisa Montgomery's past, a history of similar schemes, targeting wealthy men with fraudulent claims. James Thompson called with a strategy: they would not only fight the custody battle, but would also file criminal charges for attempted extortion. The battle lines were drawn. That night, as the babies slept under the watchful eyes of their court-appointed guardians, Nicholas and Mary Bell sat together in the library, planning their next moves. The fight ahead would be brutal, but they were ready. My grandfather would say, Mary Bell offered softly, that the greatest test of our character isn't in avoiding battles, but in choosing which ones are worth fighting for. Nicholas took her hand, drawing strength from her presence. These babies are worth everything. And when this is over, I'm going to find out who really left them here and why. Outside, the media cameras continued their vigilant watch, unaware that the real story was far more complex than their sensational headlines suggested. Inside, two people who had lost everything were finding the courage to fight for a new kind of family, one born not of blood, but of choice, circumstance, and love. The morning sun painted golden streaks across the mansion's kitchen as Mary Bell taught Nicholas how to properly prepare baby formula. His usually confident hands were clumsy with the tiny measurements, but his determination to learn was evident in his focused expression. You're pressing too hard on the bottle, she guided gently, her hands covering his to demonstrate the right pressure. Babies need a gentle touch. The proximity caused both of them to pause momentarily, aware of the growing comfort in their casual touches. 2 weeks had passed since the confrontation with Lisa Montgomery, and life in the mansion had developed its own rhythm. The court-appointed monitors had become almost invisible presences, touched by the genuine care they witnessed between the makeshift family. Nicholas found himself watching Mary Bell during quiet moments, the way she sang softly to the babies during late-night feedings, how she remembered each infant's subtle differences despite their identical appearances. He saw in her the same natural grace with children that Emma had possessed, yet Mary Bell was uniquely herself, strong, independent, and unafraid to challenge him. "You've never asked about their names," Nicholas said one evening, as they sat in the nursery after putting the babies to sleep. The question had been weighing on him, aware that naming them might make the attachment even stronger if they lost the custody battle. Mary Bell looked up from the baby clothes she was folding, all purchased by Nicholas but organized by her practical hands. "I thought you might want to wait." Until she paused, then continued softly, "until we know they're staying." The use of "we" didn't escape Nicholas's notice. Neither did the fact that Mary Bell had missed 3 more modeling interviews to stay with the babies. Her dedication touched him deeply, even as it added to his guilt. "Your modeling career," he began one morning, watching her soothe one of the crying infants with practiced ease. "You're putting it all on hold. I can't ask you to sacrifice your dreams for this situation." Mary Bell's response was immediate and firm. "First, you didn't ask, I chose this. Second," she smiled, adjusting the baby in her arms, "some dreams change when something more important comes along." Their conversations grew deeper during the quiet night hours, sharing stories of their pasts between baby feedings. Nicholas spoke of Emma's laugh, of James's first steps, of the joy he'd forgotten he was capable of feeling. Mary Bell told him about her parents' love story, her sister Sarah's courage, and her grandfather's wisdom that had guided her through the darkest times. One particularly challenging night, after all 3 babies had been colicky, Nicholas found Mary Bell crying softly in the kitchen. Without hesitation, he pulled her into his arms, offering the same comfort she'd given him countless times over the past weeks. "I called Sarah's doctor today," she confessed against his chest. "The new treatment they recommended, I can't afford it. The diner's been understanding about my absence, but the bills keep coming." Her voice broke slightly. Nicholas pulled back, looking into her eyes with intensity. "Let me help, please. You've done so much for me, for these babies. Let me do this for your sister." Mary Bell started to protest, but Nicholas continued, "Not as charity, as family. Because that's what we've become, haven't we?" The word family hung between them, loaded with meaning. Mary Bell saw in Nicholas's eyes the same hope and fear she felt: hope for what they were building together, fear of having it torn away by circumstances beyond their control. Their relationship shifted subtly after that night. Nicholas found reasons to touch her more often, a hand at the small of her back as they passed in hallways, fingers brushing as they exchanged babies or bottles. Mary Bell began leaving small notes for him around the house, quotes from her grandfather that seemed particularly relevant to their situation. The staff noticed the changes in Nicholas. Patricia, his executive assistant, commented on his transformed demeanor during brief visits to the office. Gone was the cold, unapproachable CEO, replaced by a man who smiled at baby photos on his phone and rushed home for feeding times. Even James Thompson remarked on the change during a legal strategy session. "I haven't seen you this alive since Emma," he said carefully, watching his friend's reaction. To his surprise, Nicholas didn't flinch at Emma's name. "Emma taught me how to love," Nicholas replied thoughtfully. "Mary Bell is teaching me how to live again." The court-appointed monitors documented everything in their reports, the natural way Nicholas and Mary Bell worked together, how the babies responded to both of them, the stable and loving environment they'd created. These observations would prove crucial in the custody battle ahead. One evening, as a storm raged outside, the power went out in the mansion. Nicholas found Mary Bell in the nursery, singing softly to the babies by candlelight. But the scene struck him with such force that he had to lean against the doorframe, the beauty of it, the rightness of her there with his children. "I think I'm falling in love with you," he said quietly, the words slipping out before he could stop them. The thunder outside punctuated his confession. Mary Bell didn't turn around, but her voice was steady when she replied, "I think I fell in love with you somewhere between changing diapers and fighting for these babies." They didn't move toward each other, didn't share a passionate kiss. Instead, they remained where they were, the sleeping babies between them, the candlelight flickering across their faces. Sometimes the most profound moments are the quietest ones. The next morning, as sunshine returned and power was restored, nothing and everything had changed. They still had battles ahead, legal, personal, emotional, but now they faced them not just as allies, but as two people who had found something unexpected and precious in the midst of chaos. "My grandfather would say," Mary Bell mused as they shared coffee in the kitchen, "that love doesn't always arrive with fanfare. Sometimes it builds quietly in stolen moments and shared challenges, until one day you realize it's become the foundation you're standing on." Nicholas took her hand across the counter, his thumb tracing patterns on her palm. "Your grandfather was a wise man. I wish I could have met him." "He would have liked you," she replied softly. "Especially the you that you've become." The morning headlines hit Nicholas's desk like bombs. Reynolds Enterprises faces hostile takeover amid CEO's personal drama. Robert Sterling, his biggest competitor and longtime rival, had seized upon the custody battle chaos to launch an aggressive bid for control of the company. Patricia burst into his home office, her usually composed demeanor cracking. "The board is calling an emergency meeting. Sterling's team has been quietly buying shares for weeks. They're presenting a vote of no confidence in your leadership." But Nicholas studied the financial reports spread across his desk, the numbers blurring before his eyes. The company's stock had dropped 30% since the news of the custody battle broke. Major clients were getting nervous, and Sterling's vultures were circling. "They're saying you're distracted," Patricia continued softly. "That your personal situation is compromising your judgment. Sterling is offering stability and focused leadership." Before Nicholas could respond, Mary Bell appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "Nicholas, it's Sarah." "She's in the hospital," her voice trembled. "The doctors say she needs the surgery now. Her heart can't wait any longer." The universe seemed to be testing them all at once. Nicholas stood, torn between the company he'd built and the woman he'd grown to love. The sound of one of the babies crying echoed down the hallway, adding to the weight of the moment. "Go," he told Mary Bell firmly. "I'll handle things here and join you as soon as I can." He reached for his phone to arrange for immediate payment of Sarah's medical expenses, but Patricia interrupted with more urgent news. "Sterling's team has frozen your personal accounts," she said grimly. "They're claiming potential misuse of company funds in the custody battle. Everything needs to be reviewed before you can access any money." Mary Bell's eyes widened in horror. "But Sarah's surgery?" Nicholas's jaw tightened. "Patricia, call James. Tell him we need to fight this now. And get me Henderson at the bank. There must be a way around this freeze." As Patricia rushed out, Mary Bell sank into a chair, overwhelmed. "I can't lose my sister, Nicholas. She's all I have left of my family." "You have me," Nicholas replied firmly. "You have us. And I promise you Sarah will get her surgery." His mind was already racing through options, assets they couldn't freeze, favors he could call in. The nanny they'd hired to help with the babies appeared, holding one of the crying infants. "Mr. Reynolds, I think they're coming down with something. They're running fevers." Mary Bell immediately took the baby, her own concerns temporarily forgotten as she checked its temperature. "All three of them?" she asked, maternal instinct overriding everything else. "Yes, and the pediatrician can't come until tomorrow. She's at a conference." Nicholas watched Mary Bell cradle the feverish infant, her own sister fighting for life across town, and felt the weight of responsibility crushing down on him. The empire he'd built was under attack, the family he was fighting to create was threatened from all sides, and the woman he loved was being forced to choose between her sister and the baby she'd come to see as her own. James Thompson arrived within the hour, his bow tie askew, a sure sign of the emergency's magnitude. "It's worse than we thought," he announced grimly. "Sterling's team is arguing that your emotional involvement with Mary Bell and the custody situation represents a conflict of interest. They're using it to justify the asset freeze." "How long to fight this?" Nicholas demanded. "Best case? A week. Worst case? Could be months." Mary Bell, who had been listening while tending to the feverish babies, spoke up. "Sarah doesn't have months. She barely has days." Nicholas made a decision then, one that would either save or destroy everything he'd built. "James, what if I step down voluntarily, temporarily? Would that release the asset freeze faster?" The room fell silent. James adjusted his glasses, considering. "Yes, but Nick, everything you've built can be rebuilt," Nicholas finished firmly. "Lives can't." Mary Bell tried to protest, but Nicholas cut her off gently. "Your grandfather once said that our true worth isn't in what we own, but in what we're willing to give up for those we love. I'm choosing our family, all of our family, over everything else." The next hours were a blur of activity. Nicholas signed papers relinquishing temporary control of his company. James worked his legal magic to expedite the release of sufficient funds. Mary Bell coordinated with Sarah's doctors while simultaneously caring for 3 sick infants. By nightfall, Sarah was being prepped for surgery, the baby's fevers were starting to respond to medication, and Nicholas's resignation was breaking news on every channel. The mansion felt like a fortress under siege, with reporters camped outside and phones ringing constantly. As they sat in the hospital waiting room, Mary Bell turned to Nicholas. "You gave up everything you built. For us." Nicholas took her hand, his voice sure despite the chaos surrounding them. "I built that company after I lost Emma and James because I thought success could fill the void they left. But these past weeks with you and the babies, and yes, with Sarah too, have taught me what really matters." A nurse appeared with news that Sarah's surgery was progressing well. In the mansion, the night nurse reported the baby's fevers were finally breaking. Small victories, but significant ones. "We're not out of the woods yet," James warned, arriving with coffee for everyone. "Sterling's team is moving fast, and the custody hearing is still scheduled for next week." Nicholas nodded, his expression determined. "Then we'll fight. Not for the company, although we'll get that back too, but for our family. All of it." Mary Bell squeezed his hand, understanding the depth of his commitment. "My grandfather also used to say that sometimes we have to lose everything to find out what we really have." Nicholas smiled despite the circumstances. "Your grandfather really did have a saying for everything, didn't he?" "He would have stood up to bullies like Sterling," Mary Bell replied softly. "He believed that doing the right thing was always worth the cost." Mark Stevens stood at the podium in the Reynolds Enterprises lobby, surrounded by a crowd of former employees. 5 years ago, Nicholas had fired him during what the staff called the purge, the dark period after Emma and James's death. Now he was here to repay an unexpected kindness. When Mr. Reynolds fired me, Mark began, his voice carrying across the hushed lobby, I thought my career was over, but the next day I received an anonymous recommendation letter that helped me land an even better position. Last week I learned it was Nicholas who wrote that letter. The crowd murmured. More former employees stepped forward, each sharing similar stories. Nicholas had fired them, yes, but had quietly ensured they landed on their feet. The cold-hearted CEO image began to crack. Patricia Wilson, watching from the side, smiled knowingly. She'd kept every letter Nicholas had written, knowing someday the truth would matter. Now, as Sterling's takeover bid threatened everything, these former employees were returning to stand by the man who had helped them in secret. The media narrative began to shift. Diana Chen from the Los Angeles Tribune wrote a powerful piece titled The Hidden Heart of Nicholas Reynolds, featuring interviews with dozens of former employees. The story went viral, catching Sterling's team off guard. In the hospital, where Sarah was recovering from her successful surgery, Mary Bell read the article out to her sister. See, Sarah said weakly, I told you he was different. The way he looks at you, it's like you're his miracle. Meanwhile, Joe Henderson from the diner had organized a fundraiser. His small restaurant became the unexpected headquarters of a grassroots movement supporting Nicholas and Mary Bell's fight for the triplets. She's worked for me for years, Joe told anyone who would listen. Best waitress I ever had, but more importantly, the kindest soul you'll meet. Those babies couldn't ask for a better mother. The diner's regulars, many of whom Mary Bell had served countless cups of coffee, began spreading the word. Soon, local businesses were displaying "We Stand with Nicholas Mary Bell" signs in their windows. Old Pete from the auto shop had finally finished restoring Mary Bell's Beetle. It's not just a car, he explained to a news crew that spotted the vintage vehicle outside his shop. It's her father's legacy, and that Reynolds fellow, he paid for the restoration anonymously, wanted her to have this piece of her dad back. The community's support manifested in unexpected ways. When Sterling's team tried to stage a press conference outside Reynolds Enterprises, they found the street filled with protesters, employees past and present, diner regulars, local business owners, all standing together. Mrs. Rodriguez, despite her age, organized a group of neighborhood grandmothers to cook meals for the mansion's staff and security team. Family is family, she declared firmly. And those babies have found theirs. Inside the mansion, the court-appointed monitors couldn't help but be moved by what they witnessed. Their reports began to reflect not just the mechanical details of childcare, but the genuine love and community support surrounding the unusual family. James Thompson worked tirelessly, but now he had help. Local lawyers, many of whom had faced Nicholas in court over the years, offered their services pro bono. They remembered how, even in victory, Nicholas had often helped their clients find new opportunities. It's not about winning anymore, one veteran attorney explained. It's about doing what's right for those children. The hospital staff caring for Sarah became unexpected allies. They witnessed Nicholas's daily visits, saw how he handled the medical bills without fanfare, observed his gentle support of both Stewart's sisters. In 15 years of nursing, Sarah's primary nurse told a reporter, I've never seen someone fight so hard for a family he chose, rather than one he was born into. Detective Anderson, still investigating the triplets' mysterious arrival, found himself moved by the community's response. His reports began emphasizing the stability and love the babies had found, rather than just the unusual circumstances of their appearance. Even Nicholas's competitors were affected. Several board members who had initially supported Sterling's takeover bid began to waver, touched by the outpouring of support from employees and the community. The turning point came when Emma's parents, who had distanced themselves after their daughter's death, arrived at the mansion. They had been following the news and wanted to meet the woman who had helped their former son-in-law find his heart again. "Emma would have liked you," her mother told Mary Bell, holding one of the babies. "She always said Nicholas needed someone strong enough to challenge him, but gentle enough to heal him." Social media exploded with Stand With Reynolds hashtags. Former clients shared stories of Nicholas's integrity in business dealings. Employees posted about his quiet acts of kindness. The cold, ruthless CEO image Sterling had tried to exploit crumbled in the face of overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Local churches and community centers began organizing prayer vigils and support rallies. The mansion's gates became a makeshift memorial, covered with notes, flowers, and children's drawings. My grandfather would say, Mary Bell remarked one evening, watching the news coverage, that true wealth isn't in bank accounts, but in the number of lives you've touched without keeping score. Nicholas, holding a sleeping baby, looked at the community that had rallied around them. "I spent years building walls to keep people out," he said softly. "I never expected them to tear down those walls with love." The support continued to grow, becoming a movement larger than just a custody battle or a corporate takeover. It became a story about community, about chosen family, about redemption and second chances. But the transformation of Nicholas Evans Reynolds happened not in grand gestures, but in quiet moments that accumulated like snowflakes building into an avalanche. It began with a 3 a.m. feeding, when he found himself humming Emma's old lullaby to a fussy baby. Instead of the usual wave of grief, he felt a gentle warmth, as if Emma was smiling down at him. Mary Bell discovered him in the nursery, tears streaming down his face as he rocked the infant. "I thought I'd forgotten the melody," he whispered. Emma used to sing it every night to James. Instead of changing the subject, as he once would have, he began sharing stories of his lost family with a soft, healing kind of remembrance. Their days fell into a rhythm that felt both chaotic and perfectly natural. Nicholas learned to change diapers with the same precision he once applied to business deals. Mary Bell found herself adopting his methodical approach to organizing the nursery, creating spreadsheets for feeding schedules that made him smile with approval. In the hospital, Sarah's recovery became a family affair. Nicholas would bring the babies for brief visits, understanding instinctively that seeing them helped heal not just Sarah, but Mary Bell too. The sight of him in his expensive suit, confidently handling 3 infants while discussing medical details with doctors, made Mary Bell's heart swell with emotions she hadn't dared name yet. "You know," Sarah said one afternoon, watching Nicholas bottle feed one of the babies while discussing her treatment plan, "sometimes the family you choose is stronger than the one you're born into." Her words touched something deep in both Nicholas and Mary Bell. The court-appointed monitors observed the subtle changes. Where Nicholas had once been stiff and formal, he now moved with the natural grace of a father, anticipating the baby's needs before they could cry. Mary Bell's innate maternal instincts had deepened into something more profound, a fierce, protective love that encompassed not just the triplets, but Nicholas and Sarah as well. One evening, as they sat in the library after putting the babies to sleep, Nicholas broke their comfortable silence. "I used to come here to hide from the world," he admitted, gesturing to the book-lined walls. "Now it feels empty without baby toys scattered everywhere." Mary Bell smiled, understanding the deeper meaning behind his words. "And how does that make you feel?" she asked, channeling her grandfather's gentle wisdom. Nicholas considered the question seriously. "Alive," he finally answered. "Terrified. Grateful." Sometimes all at once, the honesty in his voice made Mary Bell reach for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. The biggest shift came during a board meeting Nicholas attended via video conference. One of the babies started crying in the background, and instead of being embarrassed or rushing to end the call, he calmly asked for a moment, tended to the infant, and returned to the discussion with the baby contentedly snuggled against his chest. 5 years ago, Patricia commented afterward, you would have fired someone for letting a baby interrupt a meeting. Nicholas's response was simple but profound. 5 years ago, I was barely living. Now I know what matters. Mary Bell underwent her own transformation. The young woman who had been desperately chasing modeling dreams found herself dreaming of different things: family foundations to help single parents, support programs for siblings of chronically ill children, ways to turn their personal challenges into hope for others. Sarah noticed the change in her sister during her hospital recovery. You're not just surviving anymore, she observed. You're thriving. And it's not about the mansion or the money, it's about finding your purpose. The triplets, growing stronger each day, became the heart of their evolving family unit. Nicholas and Mary Bell developed an almost telepathic ability to communicate during midnight feedings and diaper changes. Their movements around each other became a carefully choreographed dance of shared purpose and deepening connection. One particularly challenging evening, when all three babies were cranky and overtired, Nicholas and Mary Bell found themselves laughing hysterically in the nursery, covered in baby powder and utterly exhausted. Emma would love this, Nicholas said suddenly, then froze, surprised by how naturally the words had come. Mary Bell touched his face gently. Of course she would. She's part of their story too. Part of what made you the father you are becoming. The moment was interrupted by another baby's cry, but the healing it represented lingered. Their emotional growth became evident in how they handled challenges. When news arrived that Sterling's team had uncovered potentially damaging information about Nicholas's past business dealings, his first concern wasn't for his reputation but for how it might affect their family. We'll face it together, Mary Bell said firmly, echoing words her grandfather had often used. Whatever comes, we face it as a family. The fact that Nicholas found more comfort in her words than in his lawyer's assurances showed how far he'd come. Even the staff noticed the changes. The mansion's atmosphere transformed from its former museum-like sterility to a warm, lived-in home. Baby toys mingled with antique furniture, and the sound of laughter echoed through previously silent halls. One night, Nicholas found Mary Bell in the nursery, teaching the babies her grandfather's sayings. They're too young to understand, he teased gently. But you do, she replied, looking up at him with eyes full of love and certainty. And that's what matters, because you'll help me teach them, won't you? The question carried weight beyond the simple sharing of wisdom. It was about future, about family, about commitment. Nicholas's answer came without hesitation: every day, for as long as you'll let me. The Reynolds Enterprises boardroom crackled with tension on the morning of the emergency shareholders' meeting. Robert Sterling stood at the head of the table, his silver hair and expensive suit projecting an image of stability that contrasted sharply with the recent chaos surrounding Nicholas. Ladies and gentlemen, Sterling began, his voice smooth as aged whiskey, we're here today to discuss the future of Reynolds Enterprises. Recent events have made it clear that current leadership is compromised. He gestured to the empty CEO's chair, Nicholas's absence speaking volumes. Patricia Wilson sat in her usual spot, her tablet recording every word while her eyes tracked the shifting alliances around the table. She noticed how some board members wouldn't meet her gaze, while others showed subtle signs of discomfort with Sterling's power play. The doors burst open, and Nicholas strode in, impeccably dressed but with traces of baby powder on his sleeve, a detail that didn't escape notice. Mary Bell followed, carrying a folder of documents James Thompson had prepared. Before you vote, Nicholas announced without preamble, you should know exactly what you're voting for. He nodded to Mary Bell, who began distributing the folders. Sterling's confident smile faltered slightly. This is a closed meeting. Miss Stewart has no place. Mrs. Rodriguez sends her regards. Mary Bell interrupted smoothly, meeting Sterling's gaze. She's quite interested in how you handled her son's disability claim at Sterling Industries last year. The room went silent. Sterling's face tightened imperceptibly. The folders contained detailed investigations into Sterling's business practices, not just official records, but personal accounts from former employees, including Mrs. Rodriguez's son, who had been wrongfully terminated after a workplace injury. This company was built on more than profit margins, Nicholas continued, his voice carrying the weight of conviction. Emma understood that. I lost sight of it after her death, but recent events have reminded me what truly matters. He moved around the table, making eye contact with each board member. Sterling's offering you stability through control. I'm offering you growth through compassion. Check the numbers: our employee retention rate, our community investment returns, our client loyalty statistics. Patricia projected a series of graphs onto the wall. The data told a story that contradicted Sterling's narrative of a company in crisis. Despite recent stock fluctuations, Reynolds Enterprises' core strengths remained solid. But this isn't just about numbers, Nicholas continued. This is about legacy. About the kind of company we want to be. He pulled out his phone, showing a photo of the triplets. These babies reminded me that every decision we make affects real people, real families. Sterling attempted to regain control. This emotional appeal is exactly why leadership needs to change. Business isn't about feelings. No, Nicholas challenged. Ask your former employees about that. Ask Mrs. Rodriguez's son. Ask the families who depend on us for their livelihoods. Mark Stevens chose that moment to enter, followed by a stream of employees past and present. They filled the edges of the boardroom, silent but supportive. Their presence spoke volumes about loyalty and trust. I stepped down temporarily to protect my family, Nicholas acknowledged, and I'd do it again, because a leader who won't sacrifice for those he loves isn't fit to lead at all. The board members shifted uncomfortably as more documents circulated, evidence of Sterling's planned asset stripping once he gained control. The human cost would be devastating. Mary Bell stepped forward, her voice clear and strong. My grandfather used to say that true wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touch. This company touches thousands of lives. The question is, will those touches heal or harm? Sterling's facade cracked. This is ridiculous. We're here to discuss business, not philosophy. They're inseparable, Nicholas cut in. Every business decision is a moral decision. I learned that the hard way. He paused, looking at Emma's photo on his desk, and I won't forget it again. The vote that followed wasn't even close. Sterling left in barely contained fury, his takeover bid in shambles. The employees erupted in cheers, their faith in Nicholas vindicated. In the aftermath, as the boardroom cleared, Nicholas found himself alone with Mary Bell. Thank you, he said simply, for reminding me what Emma always knew, that business without heart is just numbers on a page. Mary Bell smiled, brushing baby powder from his sleeve. Speaking of heart, we have 3 little ones waiting at home who probably need changing. Nicholas laughed, the sound echoing in the now empty boardroom. Home, he repeated softly. That's what matters most, isn't it? They left together, leaving behind the corporate drama for the more immediate concerns of family. Outside, the sun was setting over Los Angeles, painting the sky in colors that seemed to celebrate new beginnings. The peaceful morning at the mansion was shattered by Mary Bell's sudden collapse in the nursery. Nicholas found her unconscious on the floor, one of the babies crying in the crib beside her. His world narrowed to a tunnel of fear as he called for an ambulance, cradling her limp form while the court-appointed monitor rushed to tend to the crying infant. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, the same halls where Sarah had recently recovered now echoed with different anxieties. Dr. Elizabeth Parker, who had treated Nicholas's autoimmune condition, took charge of Mary Bell's case personally. Extreme exhaustion, dangerously low blood pressure, and Dr. Parker hesitated, looking at her charts. Mr. Reynolds, when was the last time Miss Stewart had a full night's sleep or a proper meal? Nicholas felt guilt wash over him. He'd been so focused on the corporate battle, and the custody case that he hadn't noticed Mary Bell pushing herself beyond her limits. She'd been caring for the triplets, supporting Sarah's recovery, helping with his company crisis, all while neglecting her own health. Sarah, still weak from her own surgery, insisted on being wheeled to her sister's bedside. "She's always been like this," she told Nicholas, her voice trembling. "Taking care of everyone else, forgetting about herself. Just like when our parents died." The hospital tests revealed more concerning news. Years of stress, poor nutrition, and exhaustion had taken their toll. Mary Bell needed immediate intervention and complete rest, something seemingly impossible, with 3 infants depending on her. "She's pregnant," Dr. Parker announced quietly to Nicholas in the hospital corridor. "Very early stages. Given her current condition, it's a high-risk situation. She needs to make some difficult decisions." The news hit Nicholas like a physical blow. A baby, their baby, but at what risk? The memory of losing Emma and James threatened to overwhelm him. The thought of losing Mary Bell and their unborn child was unbearable. Back in the mansion, the triplets seemed to sense the absence of Mary Bell's gentle presence. Their cries were more frequent, more distressed. The nanny and monitors did their best, but nothing could replace the loving touch of the woman who had become their mother in every way that mattered. Sarah, against medical advice, discharged herself to help with the babies. "My sister risked everything to save my life," she declared stubbornly. "I won't let her lose everything she loves because she was too busy taking care of everyone else." Nicholas found himself torn between the hospital and home, trying to be present for both Mary Bell and the triplets. The custody hearing loomed just days away, and their absence of a unified front could jeopardize everything. When Mary Bell finally regained consciousness, her first words were about the babies. "Are they okay? They need their evening routine." She tried to sit up, only to be gently restrained by Nicholas. "The babies are fine," he assured her, his voice thick with emotion. "But you're not. And I can't lose you, Mary Bell. I can't lose another." His voice broke, unable to complete the thought. The pregnancy news brought both joy and fear. Mary Bell's face lit up at first, then crumpled as she understood the risks. "I want this baby," she whispered, touching her still flat stomach. "But the triplets need me too. How can I choose?" Dr. Parker presented them with options: terminate the pregnancy to focus on Mary Bell's health and the triplets, or proceed with extensive bed rest and constant monitoring, accepting the risks to both mother and child. The decision weighed heavily on them. Nicholas spent a night in the hospital chapel, something he hadn't done since Emma's death. "I can't lose her," he prayed to whoever might be listening. "I can't lose any of them." Mary Bell found strength in her grandfather's teachings. "He always said that love multiplies, it doesn't divide," she told Nicholas. "This baby is a gift, a miracle. We'll find a way." The community rallied once again. Mrs. Rodriguez moved into the mansion temporarily to help with the triplets. Sarah coordinated a schedule of volunteers, other waitresses from the diner, former Reynolds Enterprises employees, even some of the court-appointed monitors who had grown attached to the family. Nicholas transformed the master bedroom into a comfortable recovery space where Mary Bell could rest while still being near the babies. He installed monitors so she could watch them, talk to them, be present without overexerting herself. Dr. Parker developed a comprehensive care plan, coordinating with Sarah's cardiac team to ensure both sisters received optimal care. The hospital staff, touched by the family's story, went above and beyond to accommodate their unique situation. One evening, as Nicholas sat beside Mary Bell's hospital bed, she took his hand. "I'm scared," she admitted softly. "Not just for me or the baby, but for all of us. What if I'm not strong enough?" Nicholas brought her hand to his lips. "You're the strongest person I know, and you're not alone anymore. Let me be your strength now, like you've been mine." The custody hearing was postponed on medical grounds, buying them precious time. James Thompson worked to ensure their current crisis wouldn't negatively impact their case, while Detective Anderson's investigation continued to build evidence in their favor. Through it all, the triplets continued to grow and thrive, surrounded by an expanding circle of love. Their first words were attempted, their first teeth appeared, each milestone celebrated by an entire community invested in their well-being. The courthouse steps were crowded on the morning of the final custody hearing. News vans lined the street, their satellite dishes reaching toward the gray Los Angeles sky like metal trees. Nicholas stood at the base of the steps, Mary Bell beside him in a wheelchair. Her doctor's orders for the high-risk pregnancy were strict. James Thompson approached, his signature bow tie perfectly straight, a good sign, as it meant he was confident. "The DNA results are conclusive," he said quietly. "But Lisa Montgomery's team has one last card to play. They're bringing in someone new." Before Nicholas could ask who, a black limousine pulled up. The crowd parted as a woman stepped out, her resemblance to Nicholas unmistakable. Catherine Reynolds, his estranged sister, whom he hadn't seen since their parents' funeral. "Hello, little brother," Catherine said, her voice carrying across the sudden silence. "We need to talk about my nephews." Mary Bell gripped Nicholas's hand as Catherine approached. The family resemblance was striking, the same steel blue eyes, the same proud bearing. But where Nicholas's features had softened with love over recent months, Catherine's remained sharp with ambition. Inside the courthouse, the tension was palpable. Catherine sat with Lisa Montgomery's legal team, her presence a silent accusation. James Thompson leaned over to whisper to Nicholas, "She's claiming partial custody rights as the children's aunt. She's also questioning your fitness as a father given your history." The proceedings began with Lisa Montgomery's team presenting their case. The story they wove was calculated to damage Nicholas's breakdown after Emma's death, the ruthless business decisions, the cold-hearted firing of employees. Catherine testified about his emotional distance, his refusal to attend family gatherings, his isolation from all human connections. "My brother died the day Emma and James did," Catherine declared to the court. "The man sitting here today is a stranger wearing his face. These children deserve a real family, not a broken man's attempt at redemption." The words struck Nicholas like physical blows, but Mary Bell's hand in his kept him grounded. When it was their turn, James Thompson began methodically dismantling the opposition's arguments. Former employees testified about Nicholas's secret kindnesses. The court-appointed monitors presented their observations of the loving home environment. Detective Anderson shared his findings about Lisa Montgomery's history of fraudulent claims. Sarah, still weak but determined, took the stand to describe how Nicholas had saved her life by paying for her surgery, expecting nothing in return. Mrs. Rodriguez spoke about the changes she'd witnessed in both Nicholas and Mary Bell as they created a true family. The turning point came when Patricia Wilson presented years of hidden security footage from Reynolds Enterprises. Clips showed Nicholas staying late to help struggling employees, making anonymous donations to families in need, carrying a photo of Emma and James even during his coldest business dealings. "The man you claim died with his family never died at all," Patricia testified. "He just got lost in his grief. But he found his way back through love, through family, through these children who need him as much as he needs them." Catherine's composure cracked when shown evidence that she had been working with Sterling all along, hoping to gain control of the family company through the custody battle. Her testimony began to unravel under James Thompson's careful cross-examination. Mary Bell, despite her weakened condition, insisted on testifying. From her wheelchair, she addressed the court with quiet strength. "My grandfather taught me that family isn't about blood, it's about who stays when things get hard. These babies have found their family. They have a father who would give up an empire for them, a mother who loves them as her own, and a community that will move mountains to protect them." The judge, a veteran of countless custody battles, listened intently as Nicholas made his final statement. He spoke not of legal rights or DNA tests, but of love, of second chances, of the healing power of family. "5 years ago, I lost everything that mattered," he began, his voice steady. I built walls around my heart and called it strength. But these children, and this remarkable woman beside me, taught me that true strength lies in being vulnerable enough to love again. James Thompson presented their final evidence, the security footage from the night the babies were left at the mansion. The mysterious woman's face was finally clear. She was a former employee of Sterling Industries, working under Catherine's direction. The truth emerged. Sterling and Catherine had orchestrated the entire situation, using saved genetic material to create a crisis they could exploit. But their plan had backfired spectacularly, giving Nicholas exactly what he needed: a reason to open his heart again. As the judge retired to consider her verdict, Nicholas wheeled Mary Bell to a quiet corner of the courthouse. "Whatever happens," he promised, "we're family now. All of us." Catherine approached them, her facade finally crumbling. "I thought I was punishing you," she admitted, "for shutting me out after Emma died. I never expected. I never thought you'd become this person again." The judge's decision, when it came, was unequivocal. Full custody was granted to Nicholas, with Mary Bell named as co-guardian. Lisa Montgomery's claims were dismissed with prejudice, and Catherine's involvement was referred to the district attorney for investigation. Outside the courthouse, as reporters clamored for statements, Nicholas simply held Mary Bell's hand, both of them watching the setting sun paint the sky in colors of hope. Their family was finally, legally, unquestionably theirs. The tranquility of Nicholas's mansion was shattered at 3 a.m. by Mary Bell's piercing scream. Nicholas burst into their bedroom to find her doubled over in pain, blood staining the silk sheets. The pregnancy, now in its 5th month, had been precarious from the start, but nothing had prepared them for this moment. "No, no, no," Mary Bell whispered, her face ghost white. "It's too early." The baby, her hands clutched her swollen belly protectively as another wave of pain hit her. The ambulance's arrival seemed to take an eternity. Sarah, awakened by the commotion, took charge of the triplets while Mrs. Rodriguez coordinated with the night nurse. The babies, sensing the tension, began to cry in unified distress. At Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, Dr. Elizabeth Parker was already waiting. The emergency team moved with practiced efficiency, but their tense expressions betrayed the gravity of the situation. "She's hemorrhaging, doctor," Parker announced, her voice tight. "We need to get her into surgery now." Nicholas stood frozen in the hallway, the scene painfully reminiscent of the night he lost Emma. The same sterile corridors, the same overwhelming sense of helplessness. Sarah appeared beside him, having arranged care for the triplets. "This isn't like Mom and Dad's accident," she said firmly, reading his thoughts. "This time we can fight. This time we have hope." Inside the operating room, Mary Bell drifted in and out of consciousness. In her lucid moments, she made the medical team promise to save the baby first if a choice had to be made. "Tell Nicholas," she whispered to Dr. Parker, "tell him that love multiplies, it doesn't divide. My grandfather always said." The surgery lasted 6 hours. Nicholas paced the waiting room, his normally immaculate appearance disheveled, his hands shaking as he attempted to pray, something he hadn't done since Emma's death. Sarah sat quietly, her own recent surgery making her intimately familiar with the weight of waiting. Mrs. Rodriguez arrived with updates about the triplets, who were inconsolable without their parents. The elderly woman's presence provided a small measure of comfort, her quiet strength a reminder of the family they had built. James Thompson appeared with Dawn, having been called by Patricia. He carried a folder of legal documents, living wills, power of attorney, everything they hadn't wanted to think about, but now couldn't ignore. "I can't lose her," Nicholas said, to no one in particular, his voice raw. "I can't lose them. Not again. Not like this." Dr. Parker emerged from surgery, her surgical cap still on, her face showing the strain of the long procedure. "She's stable," she began, "but critical. The next 24 hours are crucial. As for the baby..." The pause seemed to stretch for eternity. "The baby's heartbeat is strong, but Mary Bell's body is trying to reject the pregnancy. We can try to maintain it, but it would put her at extreme risk. Or we can terminate to save her life. The choice has to be hers," Nicholas finished, remembering Mary Bell's strength, her unwavering commitment to family. When Mary Bell finally regained consciousness, her first words were about the baby. Despite her weakened state, her determination remained unshaken. "We're fighting for this little one," she declared, though her voice was barely a whisper. Nicholas sat beside her bed, holding her hand as if it were a lifeline. "Emma died because I wasn't there," he confessed. "I was always too busy, too focused on the next deal. I won't make that mistake again. Whatever you decide, I'm here. We all are." The next days became a delicate balance. The triplets were brought to the hospital in shifts, their presence both comforting and heartbreaking as Mary Bell could only watch them from her bed. Sarah practically moved into the hospital room, her own recovery taking a backseat to her sister's needs. The community rallied once again. The diner's customers organized a prayer vigil. Reynolds Enterprises employees set up a rotation to help with the triplets. Even Catherine, hearing of the crisis, sent specialists from Europe to consult on the case. Mary Bell's condition remained precarious. Each day brought new challenges, infections, complications, moments when her body seemed ready to give up. But her spirit never wavered. She talked to her unborn child constantly, telling stories about their family, about her grandfather's wisdom, about the love waiting to welcome them. Nicholas found himself spending nights in the hospital chapel, no longer certain who or what he was praying to, but knowing he needed something bigger than himself to believe in. "I've learned to love again," he whispered into the quiet space. "Please don't let that be my punishment." While Mary Bell fought for her life in the hospital, another crisis erupted at Reynolds Enterprises. The company's main servers were breached, releasing thousands of confidential documents to the press. The attack was precise, targeting specific files that painted Nicholas in the worst possible light. Patricia Wilson burst into Nicholas's hospital vigil, her face ashen. "It's Sterling," she said without preamble. "He found documents from your darkest period, the acquisitions where we had to lay off entire departments, the pension fund restructuring, everything." Nicholas, exhausted from nights at Mary Bell's bedside, could barely process the news. The media was having a field day with the leaked documents, portraying him as a heartless corporate raider who had destroyed countless lives for profit. "The board is calling another emergency meeting," Patricia continued hesitantly. "Several major clients have already pulled their contracts. The stock is in free fall." James Thompson arrived with more bad news. Sterling had timed his attack perfectly, waiting until Nicholas was emotionally and physically drained from Mary Bell's crisis. "He's making another move for control," James explained. "And this time he has public opinion on his side." The leaked documents told only part of the story, carefully selected to hide Nicholas's efforts to help displaced workers. But the damage was done. Business channels ran endless analyses of Reynolds Enterprises' corrupt culture, while social media exploded with calls for boycotts. In the midst of this chaos, loyal employees began speaking out. Mark Stevens, the former VP Nicholas had fired years ago, held an impromptu press conference on the company steps. "You're seeing numbers on paper," he told reporters. "What you don't see is how Nicholas Reynolds personally ensured every fired employee found new work. How he created a secret fund for their children's education. How he carried the weight of every difficult decision." The hospital room became an improvised war room. While Mary Bell slept, monitored by medical equipment, Nicholas and his team fought to save the company that employed thousands. Sarah, still maintaining her bedside vigil, watched the corporate drama unfold with growing concern. "You need to focus on Mary Bell and the babies," she insisted. "Let others fight this battle." But Nicholas knew he couldn't abandon either fight. "These employees trusted me," he replied softly. "Their families depend on us. I won't let Sterling destroy everything we've built." The true extent of Sterling's plan became clear when evidence emerged that he had orchestrated both the server breach and a coordinated media campaign. He had paid former employees to tell only the worst stories, edited security footage to remove context, and timed everything to coincide with Mary Bell's health crisis. Patricia discovered that Sterling had even tried to bribe hospital staff for details about Mary Bell's condition, planning to use her pregnancy complications against Nicholas in the corporate battle. The attempt backfired when outraged medical workers reported the bribes. Old Pete from the auto shop led a group of small business owners in a public show of support. This man helped us survive when banks wouldn't give loans, he declared to reporters. He never asked for recognition, he just said everyone deserves a chance. Inside Reynolds Enterprises, employees organized their own resistance. They shared stories of Nicholas's quiet kindness, how he remembered their children's names, attended their family funerals, celebrated their achievements. The human side of business that balance sheets couldn't show. The corporate attack began to shift as more complete documents emerged. Patricia had maintained secret copies showing the full context of Nicholas's decisions. Each ruthless business move was accompanied by personal efforts to minimize human cost. Joe from the diner organized a customer campaign supporting Reynolds Enterprises. You want to know the real Nicholas Reynolds, he challenged reporters? Watch him with those babies. Watch how he treats people who can't offer him anything. That's character money can't buy. Sterling's plan started unraveling when his own former employees began speaking out. They revealed a pattern of genuine ruthlessness, no safety net, no assistance, no compassion. The contrast with Nicholas's approach became starker with each new story. Catherine Reynolds made an unexpected appearance at the board meeting, this time to support her brother. I tried to destroy him because I thought he'd lost his humanity, she admitted to the shocked directors. I was wrong. He never lost it. He just learned to balance it with responsibility. The employees' loyalty proved decisive. When Sterling's team attempted to enter the corporate offices, they found a human chain of workers blocking their way. The sight of secretaries, janitors, and executives standing shoulder to shoulder made headlines worldwide. The strike came without warning. As Nicholas left the hospital late one night, two men in black emerged from the shadows of the parking structure. Had Detective Anderson not been making his routine check of the premises, the outcome might have been tragically different. They were professionals, Anderson reported later, as Nicholas sat in the hospital security office, still shaken. This wasn't a random attack. Someone wanted to send a message. The incident triggered a series of escalating threats. Anonymous notes appeared at the mansion containing personal details about the triplets' daily routines. Photos were delivered showing Mary Bell during her hospital stays, taken through windows when she was most vulnerable. Sarah discovered her medical records had been accessed unauthorized. Her new heart medication was mysteriously switched, nearly causing a catastrophic reaction. The attempt was caught only because Mrs. Rodriguez, with her nursing background, noticed the pills looked slightly different. The threat level escalated when the baby's nanny found a sophisticated listening device hidden in the nursery. James Thompson brought in private security experts who discovered the mansion's entire security system had been compromised. They're watching everything, the security consultant explained grimly. They know your routines, your vulnerabilities. This is personal. Detective Anderson's investigation revealed connections to Sterling Industries, but through so many layers of shell companies and hired intermediaries that proving it would be nearly impossible. The attacks were clearly designed to break them emotionally. Mary Bell, still confined to her hospital bed, became increasingly anxious about the triplets' safety. Her condition deteriorated as stress threatened her already precarious pregnancy. I should be there protecting them, she whispered during another sleepless night. Nicholas was forced to move the entire household to a secure location. The triplets were unsettled by the change, their cries more frequent and distressed. Sarah struggled to maintain her recovery schedule in unfamiliar surroundings. Even Mrs. Rodriguez's constant presence couldn't fully restore their sense of security. The media caught wind of the situation, but instead of the expected sensationalism, public sympathy turned strongly in their favor. Diana Chen's article in the Los Angeles Tribune titled "The Price of Love: A Family Under Siege" sparked widespread outrage. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. Local police increased patrols around both the hospital and the safe house. Off-duty officers volunteered their time to provide additional security. The hospital staff created a protective circle around Mary Bell's floor. Joe from the diner organized a neighborhood watch program that expanded far beyond its original scope. Local business owners, residents, and even former Reynolds Enterprises employees took shifts monitoring suspicious activity. Then came the kidnapping attempt. Two men posing as hospital orderlies tried to access Mary Bell's room during a shift change. They were stopped by an alert nurse who recognized Sarah's voice calling out in warning. The incident pushed Detective Anderson to take more aggressive action. His investigation uncovered a complex web of hired thugs, all leading back to a shadow corporation with ties to both Sterling and the mysterious woman who had originally left the triplets. Nicholas faced an impossible choice: maintain his fight for both the company and custody while his family remained under threat, or concede to whatever demands would ensure their safety. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like a physical force. Mary Bell, despite her weakened state, remained resolute. "My grandfather always said that cowards use fear because they have nothing else," she told Nicholas during a quiet moment. "We can't let them win through intimidation." The turning point came unexpectedly. One of the hired men, touched by the sight of Sarah reading stories to the triplets through the safe house window, came forward with information. His confession provided the first solid link between the attacks and their orchestrators. Catherine Reynolds, watching events unfold from her self-imposed exile, made a decisive move. She had her own investigators compile evidence of Sterling's involvement in the attacks. "I wanted the company," she admitted to Nicholas. "But not like this. Not at the cost of children's safety." The attacks culminated in one final, desperate attempt. A team of professional kidnappers breached the safe house security, only to find themselves surrounded by an unexpected force: dozens of community members who had been quietly standing guard. Old Pete from the auto shop, armed with nothing but a wrench, helped detain one would-be kidnapper. Mrs. Rodriguez's entire extended family formed a human barrier around the property. Even the hospital staff organized a rotation to ensure Mary Bell was never left unguarded. The truth emerged on a quiet Sunday morning, when Detective Anderson arrived at the safe house with a file that would change everything. The mysterious woman who had left the triplets at Nicholas's mansion had finally been identified: Elizabeth Reynolds, a half-sister Nicholas never knew existed. "Your father had another family," Anderson explained gently, spreading photographs across the table. "Before he met your mother, before you and Catherine were born. Elizabeth was his firstborn." Nicholas stared at the images, seeing familiar features echoed in a stranger's face. The Reynolds eyes, the distinctive jawline, the resemblance was undeniable. Mary Bell, watching from her wheelchair, reached for his hand as the detective continued. "Elizabeth grew up knowing about you, watching your success from afar. Your father visited her secretly throughout her childhood, but never acknowledged her publicly. When he died, she was excluded from the will, her existence buried in legal documents." The story unfolded like a carefully plotted tragedy. Elizabeth had worked her way up through Sterling Industries, hiding her connection to the Reynolds family. She had been the one to discover Sterling's plan to use the triplets as leverage for a hostile takeover. She couldn't let her father's legitimate children lose everything, Anderson explained, but she also couldn't stand by and watch Sterling destroy the family company. So she devised her own plan. The triplets, it turned out, were Elizabeth's grandchildren. Her daughter had passed away in childbirth, leaving 3 newborns who carried the distinctive Reynolds birthmark. Rather than let Sterling use them as pawns, Elizabeth had ensured they found their way to Nicholas. Catherine arrived at the safe house shortly after Anderson's revelation, her face showing the strain of her own discoveries. "I found letters," she said quietly, "in Father's study. He wrote to Elizabeth every week of her life, but never had the courage to bring her into our family openly." The weight of their father's choices hung heavy in the room. Nicholas thought of his own journey from cold-hearted businessman to loving father, of the walls he'd built and the love that had torn them down. Mary Bell, who had been quietly absorbing everything, suddenly spoke up. "Your father's mistake wasn't in loving Elizabeth," she said softly. "It was in letting fear stop him from loving her openly. My grandfather always said that secrets kept out of fear only breed more fear." Elizabeth herself had been tracked to a small town outside Los Angeles. Detective Anderson's team found her in a modest house filled with newspapers chronicling Nicholas's transformation, from the first stories about the mysterious triplets to the most recent articles about the family under siege. The decision to meet her was difficult but necessary. The safe house's living room became the setting for a reunion decades in the making. Elizabeth entered cautiously, her resemblance to Catherine even more striking in person. "I never meant to cause such chaos," she began, her voice carrying the same quiet authority Nicholas remembered in their father. "But when I learned what Sterling planned, when I saw my grandchildren being used as pawns in his game, I had to act." The story she told filled in the missing pieces. She had worked at Sterling Industries for years, rising to a position where she could monitor the company's most sensitive operations. When she discovered Sterling's scheme to use her grandchildren against Reynolds Enterprises, she turned the plan against him. "I watched you with Emma and James," she told Nicholas. "I saw how much you loved them, how their loss nearly destroyed you. I knew my grandchildren would be safe with you, that you would fight for them, love them, protect them." The triplets, as if sensing the importance of the moment, remained unusually quiet in their playpen. Elizabeth's eyes filled with tears as she watched them, seeing her daughter's features mingled with the Reynolds inheritance. Mary Bell, ever the peacemaker, was the first to bridge the gap. "They need to know their whole family," she said firmly, "all of their history, all of their relatives. No more secrets, no more hiding." Nicholas struggled with a mix of emotions: anger at his father's deception, grief for the sister he never knew, gratitude for the children she had entrusted to him. "Why didn't you come to me directly?" he asked finally. "There." Elizabeth's answer was simple but profound. "Because you needed to love them for themselves first, not out of obligation to family, and because I needed to know if you were still capable of love at all." Catherine, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly laughed, a sound of relief more than humor. "All this time," she said, "we've been fighting to protect the Reynolds family legacy, and here it was, growing larger right under our noses." The revelation of Elizabeth's identity changed everything while simultaneously resolving nothing. Sterling's threats remained, the company was still in danger, and Mary Bell's pregnancy was no less precarious. But somehow the knowledge that they were all connected by blood, by choice, by love made the challenges ahead seem more manageable. Elizabeth's revelation about Sterling Industries proved to be just the tip of the iceberg. Working late into the night at the safe house, she shared files she'd secretly compiled over years, documents that exposed the full scope of Sterling's corrupt empire. "He didn't just want Reynolds Enterprises," she explained, spreading papers across the dining room table. "He wanted to dismantle it, sell off the pieces, and destroy everything our father built." Her voice carried the weight of years of silent observation. Patricia Wilson arrived with her own evidence, boxes of meticulously maintained records that documented every questionable move Sterling had made over the past decade. "I've been tracking him since he first started showing interest in our company," she admitted. "Something about him never felt right." The pattern that emerged was devastating. Sterling had systematically targeted family-owned companies, using personal information to create crises that forced sales. The attacks on Nicholas's family weren't just business, they were his standard operating procedure. James Thompson, Reviewing the evidence with his characteristic thoroughness, discovered connections to dozens of destroyed companies. He doesn't just buy businesses, he explained grimly. He breaks families, shatters legacies, and profits from the pieces. Detective Anderson brought in federal investigators, the scale of Sterling's operations too large for local authorities. This goes beyond corporate raids, he told Nicholas. We're looking at organized criminal activity spanning multiple states. The loyal employees who had stood by Nicholas began coming forward with their own stories. Many had been approached by Sterling's agents, offered bribes to undermine Reynolds' enterprises from within. Those who refused faced threats and intimidation. Mark Stevens revealed that his firing years ago had actually been orchestrated by Sterling's team. They planted evidence of misconduct, he explained. Nicholas firing me wasn't cruelty, he was protecting the company, even if he didn't know it at the time. The corporate investigation quickly expanded to include the attacks on the family. Elizabeth's position within Sterling Industries had allowed her to document the connection between Sterling's corporate raiders and the hired thugs who had threatened Mary Bell and the children. He uses the same tactics everywhere, Elizabeth explained, her face tight with controlled anger. Find what people love most, threaten it, and watch them crumble. That's why I had to get the triplets to safety before he could use them. Catherine, putting her business acumen to positive use for once, traced the money trails. Sterling had created an elaborate network of shell companies, each designed to hide his involvement in increasingly aggressive tactics. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Rodriguez's son, the one who had been wrongfully terminated from Sterling Industries, had kept detailed records of safety violations and worker intimidation. His evidence provided the key to unraveling Sterling's entire operation. Nicholas watched as years of corporate corruption came to light. The man who had threatened everything he loved was being exposed as a fraud, a bully who preyed on family businesses during their most vulnerable moments. Mary Bell, still confined to her wheelchair but sharp as ever, noticed a pattern in the documents. Look at the timing, she pointed out. Every attack on a family business coincided with a personal crisis, deaths, illnesses, children in trouble. He waits for people to be at their weakest. The evidence was presented to the Reynolds Enterprises board in an emergency session. The directors, many of whom had wavered during Sterling's attacks, were stunned by the scope of his criminal enterprise. Sterling's response was predictable: an aggressive legal threat followed by attempts to discredit the evidence. But his usual tactics fell flat against the united front presented by the Reynolds family and their supporters. Old Pete from the auto shop organized a gathering of small business owners who had resisted Sterling's previous takeover attempts. Their stories, combined with Elizabeth's evidence, painted a damning picture of systematic corporate terrorism. The federal investigation expanded rapidly. Sterling's carefully constructed empire began to crumble as investors, board members, and business partners distanced themselves from the growing scandal. Nicholas found himself in an unexpected position, not just fighting for his own company, but becoming a voice for family businesses targeted by corporate raiders. His story of choosing family over profit resonated with people across the country. The loyal employees who had stood guard over the children were revealed as heroes in their own right. Many had recognized Sterling's tactics from previous encounters and had chosen to stand their ground, protecting not just their jobs but the principles of ethical business. As the truth emerged, media coverage shifted dramatically. Diana Chen's follow-up article, "The Fall of an Empire: How Greed Targeted Love," became a rallying cry for corporate reform. The final piece fell into place when Elizabeth provided recordings of Sterling's direct orders regarding the attacks on Nicholas's family. The man's own words revealed the cold calculation behind his actions, the deliberate targeting of children to create leverage. The morning Mary Bell went into labor, Los Angeles woke to the news of Sterling's arrest. Federal agents had taken him into custody at dawn, the evidence provided by Elizabeth and the Reynolds family proving insurmountable. But in the delivery room at Cedar-Sinai Medical Center, such victories seemed distant and unimportant. "Something's wrong," Mary Bell whispered, her face contorted with pain. The pregnancy, against all odds, had reached its 8th month, but complications arose during labor. Dr. Parker's expression grew increasingly concerned as monitors beeped urgently. Nicholas stood by Mary Bell's side, his corporate victories forgotten in the face of possible personal loss. Sarah, still recovering from her own surgery, paced the waiting room with the kind of anxiety only a sister could feel. The triplets, now toddling and beginning to form words, were being cared for by Mrs. Rodriguez at the safe house. "We need to perform an emergency C-section," Dr. Parker announced, her voice carrying the weight of urgency. "Both mother and baby are in distress." As they rushed Mary Bell to surgery, she grabbed Nicholas's hand. "Remember what my grandfather said about love multiplying?" she managed through the pain. "No matter what happens, promise me you'll remember that." The operating room became a battlefield where life and death waged their ancient war. Dr. Parker worked with focused intensity, her team moving in synchronized precision. Nicholas, allowed to stay because of Mary Bell's critical condition, felt the same helplessness he'd experienced the night he lost Emma. But this time was different. This time he wasn't alone in his fear. Outside the operating room, a community held its breath. Sarah led prayers in the waiting room. The hospital staff, who had protected Mary Bell through months of threats, moved with extra determination. Elizabeth arrived at the hospital, bringing an unexpected sense of calm to the tense atmosphere. "The Reynolds women are strong," she told Sarah quietly. "Your sister has that strength too, even if she doesn't share our blood." In the operating room, the minutes stretched like hours. Then, piercing through the tension, came a sound that made Nicholas's heart stop a baby's first cry, strong and defiant. But the victory was immediately tempered by a drop in Mary Bell's vital signs. "We're losing her," someone called out. The medical team moved with renewed urgency as Mary Bell's heartbeat became erratic. Nicholas found himself praying to Emma, to his parents, to Mary Bell's grandfather, anyone who might be listening. Sarah, sensing her sister's struggle, burst into the operating room despite protocols. "Mary Bell Stewart," she called out firmly, "don't you dare leave us. Your family needs you. All of us." Whether it was the medical team's skill, Sarah's voice, or the combined will of an entire community hoping and praying, Mary Bell's vitals slowly stabilized. Dr. Parker finally stepped back, exhausted but smiling. "Congratulations," she said. "You have a daughter." The baby was perfect, a tiny miracle with Mary Bell's emerald eyes and the distinctive Reynolds jawline. As she was placed in Nicholas's arms, he saw in her features a bridge between past and present, between loss and love, between the family he'd lost and the one he'd found. Mary Bell's recovery was slow but steady. The hospital room became a gathering place for their extended family. The triplets, brought in by Mrs. Rodriguez, were fascinated by their new sister. Sarah, despite her own health challenges, barely left her sister's side. Elizabeth and Catherine, once strangers now united in aunthood, took turns helping with the babies. Their father's secret had torn the family apart, but the next generation was bringing it back together. Detective Anderson visited with news of Sterling's prosecution, but found himself more interested in making funny faces at the newborn. Old Pete proudly announced that the Beetle was ready for Mary Bell's triumphant return home. Joe from the diner organized a meal train that could have fed an army. The day Mary Bell was strong enough to hold her daughter properly, she looked at Nicholas with tears in her eyes. "My grandfather was right," she said softly. "Love doesn't divide, it multiplies. Look at our family now." Their family had grown beyond blood ties and legal documents. It included Sarah's fierce loyalty, Mrs. Rodriguez's maternal wisdom, and the community that had stood guard over them. It encompassed Elizabeth's courage, Catherine's redemption, and the triplets' innocent ability to bring people together. The naming ceremony was held in the hospital garden. Mary Bell, still in her wheelchair, but glowing with motherly pride, announced their daughter's name, Hope Emma Rodriguez Reynolds. Each name carried its own weight of meaning: hope for their future, Emma for Nicholas's past, Rodriguez for the woman who had become like a mother to them all, and Reynolds for the family legacy that had been transformed by love. As they prepared to finally return home, Nicholas looked at his expanded family: 4 babies, 2 sisters, countless friends and supporters. The corporate victory over Sterling seemed small compared to this personal triumph of love over fear, of family over fortune. "Your grandfather," he told Mary Bell as she cradled their daughter, "would be proud of how his wisdom helped build this family." Mary Bell smiled, watching the triplets try to teach their new sister how to smile. He always said that the greatest victories aren't won in boardrooms or courtrooms, but in the quiet moments when love proves stronger than fear. 1 year after Hope's birth, the Reynolds mansion buzzed with activity as preparations for a very special celebration got underway. The triplets, now sturdy toddlers, chased each other through the halls while Hope took her first tentative steps, caught between Mary Bell and Nicholas's encouraging arms. Just like her brothers, Mrs. Rodriguez observed, watching from her favorite armchair. Always in a hurry to catch up, the elderly woman had officially moved into the mansion's guest house, her presence as essential to the family as air itself. Sarah, fully recovered and glowing with health, directed the decoration efforts. Her heart condition was stable, thanks to the ongoing care of Dr. Parker, who had become more friend and physician to the family. The former waiting room where they had spent so many anxious hours was now named the Stuart Reynolds Family Center, a haven for families facing similar medical challenges. Elizabeth and Catherine worked together, setting up tables in the garden, where just a year ago, security guards had patrolled for threats. The sisters had found common ground in their shared love for the children, their past rivalries dissolved in the face of Aunt Hood's simple joys. "Father would never believe this," Catherine remarked, watching Elizabeth teach the triplets a clapping game. "All his secrets and separations, and here we are stronger together than we ever were apart." Nicholas stood in his study, now transformed from a corporate command center into a family space. Photos covered the walls not just of his current family, but of Emma and James too. Their images were no longer painful reminders of loss, but beloved parts of their family story. Mary Bell found him there, Hope balanced on her hip. "Your brooding spot has become considerably more cheerful," she teased, noting the finger paintings proudly displayed alongside business awards. "Emma would have loved all this chaos," Nicholas said softly, touching a photo of his first wife. "She always said I needed more noise in my life." Mary Bell's free arms slipped around his waist, her presence a comfort that asked nothing but gave everything. The occasion they were celebrating was more than just Hope's first birthday. It was the formal adoption ceremony for the triplets, the legal completion of what their hearts had known all along. James Thompson had insisted on handling the paperwork himself, his signature bow tie perfectly straight for the occasion. Detective Anderson arrived early, no longer in his official capacity but as a friend. He brought his wife and daughters, the latter immediately joining the triplets in their games. The man who had once investigated their case was now a regular at family dinners. Joe from the diner catered the event, his famous comfort food presented alongside elegant dishes from the city's finest restaurants. Old Pete proudly parked the restored Beetle in a place of honor on the drive, its gleaming white paint a testament to both preservation and renewal. The ceremony itself was simple but profound. Judge Martinez, who had overseen their lengthy custody battle, now smiled broadly as she made official what love had already decreed. The triplets, dressed in matching outfits but each showing their distinct personalities, solemnly repeated their new names: James, Thomas and William Reynolds. "A family," the judge declared, "is not made by blood alone, but by love, choice and commitment." Her words echoed Mary Bell's grandfather's wisdom, bringing tears to many eyes. As if understanding the moment's significance, Hope chose that exact moment to take her first unassisted steps, toddling from Nicholas to Mary Bell while the assembled crowd held its breath. The moment seemed to symbolize their journey: uncertain, brave, and ultimately triumphant. The party that followed was a celebration of not just family but community. The diner regulars who had prayed for Mary Bell during her pregnancy now played with the children. Former Reynolds Enterprises employees who had stood guard during the dark days shared stories and laughter. Sarah, watching her sister's happiness, found herself sharing memories of their parents with Elizabeth and Catherine. They would have loved being part of this, she said. Especially Dad, he always wanted a big, noisy family. As evening approached, Mrs. Rodriguez gathered the children for a story. It was a new tale, one that spoke of a lonely king who found his heart, a brave waitress who never lost faith, and 3 magical babies who brought love back to a silent castle. Nicholas and Mary Bell slipped away to the quiet of the garden, where the first stars were appearing. Your grandfather, Nicholas said, would say this is what he meant about love multiplying. Mary Bell smiled, hearing Hope's laughter mingle with her brother's from inside. He would say that healing comes not from forgetting the past, but from building a future big enough to hold all of it, the pain and the joy, the losses and the gains. The sound of music drifted out from the house. Someone had started playing the piano. The triplets' excited voices carried clearly, "Daddy, Mummy, come dance." Nicholas looked at Mary Bell, remembering a broken-down beetle and a red miniskirt. "Shall we?" he asked, extending his hand with exaggerated formality. "Always," she replied, taking it. As they walked back toward their family, the mansion glowed with warmth and life, every window lit, every room filled with the sound of love multiplying. The transformation of Reynolds Enterprises began in the aftermath of their personal victory. Nicholas, forever changed by his journey from isolated millionaire to family man, announced the creation of the Stuart Reynolds Foundation during a press conference that made headlines across Los Angeles. "Business isn't just about profit," he declared, Mary Bell standing proudly beside him. "It's about building communities that support families through their darkest hours." The Foundation's first initiative was the conversion of a defunct Sterling Industries building into a comprehensive family support center. Mrs. Rodriguez became the center's first director, her years of nursing experience and maternal wisdom making her the perfect choice. The facility offered childcare for working parents, medical support for families facing health crises, and job training for those starting over. Sarah, drawing from her own medical journey, developed a specialized program for siblings of chronically ill children. "No one should face these challenges alone," she explained to Diana Chen, who covered the center's opening for the Los Angeles Tribune. "Sometimes the strongest medicine is knowing others understand your struggle." Mary Bell's old diner became a hub for the Foundation's job placement program. Joe expanded the space, creating a training kitchen where people could learn culinary skills. The sight of former executives learning alongside struggling single parents embodied the Foundation's mission of breaking down social barriers. Elizabeth and Catherine jointly managed the Foundation's corporate outreach, their combined business acumen now directed toward helping rather than competing. They created a network of family-friendly companies committed to supporting employees through personal crises. Old Pete's Auto Shop became a vocational training center teaching mechanical skills to young people who couldn't afford traditional education. The restored Beetle sat in the shop's front window, a symbol of how broken things could be made beautiful again with enough care and commitment. The hospital wing where Mary Bell had fought for her life was renovated and expanded, becoming a specialized unit for high-risk pregnancies and pediatric care. Dr. Parker led the medical team, implementing programs that treated not just patients but entire families. Detective Anderson helped establish a security program that protected vulnerable families from corporate predators like Sterling. His experience with their case had shown him how often business disputes spilled over into personal attacks. The impact rippled through Los Angeles. Other companies began adopting the Reynolds model of corporate responsibility. The sight of Nicholas attending board meetings with hope in his arms had sparked a cultural shift in how business and family life could coexist. The mansion itself evolved into a community gathering place. The gardens where security guards had once patrolled now hosted weekly picnics for families in the Foundation's programs. The triplets and Hope played with children from all walks of life, unaware of the social barriers their playground games were breaking down. James Thompson established a legal aid division within the Foundation, offering support to families facing custody battles or corporate bullying. His bow tie became a symbol of hope to those fighting seemingly impossible odds. Patricia Wilson developed a mentorship program pairing experienced professionals with struggling parents returning to work. The program's success rate caught national attention, with other cities requesting guidance on implementing similar initiatives. The Foundation's influence spread beyond Los Angeles. Mary Bell's story of perseverance inspired a nationwide movement of community support networks. Her grandfather's wisdom about love multiplying became the Foundation's unofficial motto. The annual Stuart Reynolds Foundation Gala became the city's most anticipated event, not for its glamour but for its heart. Families who had been helped returned to help others, creating an ever-expanding circle of support and understanding. Reynolds Enterprises itself was transformed. The corporate offices included a state-of-the-art childcare center. Employees were guaranteed support during family crises. The company's profits actually increased as employee loyalty and productivity soared. 1 year after the Foundation's launch, they celebrated their first 1,000 families helped. The celebration was held in the garden, where Hope had taken her first steps. Success stories filled the air: parents who had found jobs, children who had overcome illnesses, families who had been reunited. Nicholas watched it all from his study window, holding Hope while the triplets played at his feet. Mary Bell joined him, wrapping her arms around them both. "Your grandfather would be proud," he said softly. "This is what he meant about true wealth, isn't it?" He would say. Mary Bell replied, watching Sarah organize games for the gathered children, that the measure of success isn't in what we gain, but in what we give back. The Foundation became a model for corporate philanthropy, proving that business success and social responsibility could coexist. But more importantly, it proved that one family's journey through hardship could create ripples of hope touching countless others. On the 5th anniversary of Hope's birth, the Reynolds mansion hosted a different kind of gathering. Every person who had played a part in their story was there, from Mrs. Rodriguez to Detective Anderson, from Old Pete to Diana Chen. Even Judge Martinez attended, no longer in her official capacity, but as a friend of the family. The triplets, now active kindergartners, led younger children in games across the lawn where security guards had once stood watch. Hope, her mother's emerald eyes bright with excitement, followed her brothers everywhere, the living embodiment of her name. Nicholas stood at the garden podium, Mary Bell beside him, looking out at the faces that had become so much more than a community. They had become family. The time had come to share what they had learned, to put into words the journey that had transformed not just their lives, but countless others. 5 years ago, Nicholas began, his voice carrying across the hushed gathering. I was a different man. I had walls around my heart so high that even I couldn't remember what it felt like to love. He glanced at the photo of Emma and James, now displayed proudly alongside pictures of their expanded family. Mary Bell took up the story, her hand finding Nicholas's. And I was a waitress with a broken-down beetle and dreams that seemed impossible. She smiled at Sarah, healthy and glowing in the front row. But my grandfather always said that life's greatest blessings often come disguised as our greatest challenges. The story they shared wasn't just their own. It was about Mrs. Rodriguez, who had turned her nurturing spirit into a mission that helped countless families. It was about Sarah, whose battle with illness had inspired a program supporting siblings of sick children. It was about Elizabeth and Catherine, who had transformed a family secret into a force for unity. Love, Nicholas continued, looking at his children playing in the garden, isn't a finite resource that gets divided. It multiplies. Each new person we love doesn't diminish our capacity to love others, it expands it. The evidence was all around them. The diner regulars who had become extended family, the former employees who had stood guard over their children, the medical staff who had fought alongside them. Each connection had created more connections. Each act of kindness had inspired more kindness. Mary Bell spoke of her grandfather's wisdom, their small notebooks, placed on each chair capturing his sayings alongside their own learned truths. Family isn't defined by blood, she read. It's defined by who stays when staying gets hard. The triplets, sensing the moment's importance, gathered close to their parents. Hope climbed into Nicholas's arms, her small hand reaching for her mother's cheek. The gesture, so full of natural love and trust, said more than words ever could. Our journey taught us that true strength isn't in standing alone, Nicholas continued. It's in allowing others to stand with you. It's in recognizing that vulnerability isn't weakness, it's the courage to let love in. Sarah joined them at the podium, her presence a testament to the power of sisterly love. And healing, she added, doesn't mean forgetting the past. It means building a future big enough to hold all of it, the pain and the joy, the losses and the gains. Mrs. Rodriguez stood next, her aging face beautiful with wisdom. Family, she declared, is not what you are born into. It is what you build, what you choose, what you fight for. One by one, others rose to share what they had learned. Detective Anderson spoke of justice tempered with compassion. James Thompson, his bow tie perfect as always, talked about laws being meaningless without love. Elizabeth and Catherine shared their story of rivalry transformed into sisterhood. The final speaker was Joe from the diner, his simple words carrying profound truth. Sometimes, he said, looking at the gathered crowd, a cup of coffee and a kind word can change someone's whole world. You never know when a small kindness might save a life. As the sun set over Los Angeles, casting golden light across the garden, Nicholas and Mary Bell gathered their children close. The triplets, James, Thomas, and William, surrounded their little sister Hope, their laughter carrying across the evening air. This, Mary Bell said softly, is what my grandfather meant about wealth. Not money in the bank, but love in the heart. Not power over others, but the strength to lift others up. Nicholas looked at his family, not just his children and wife, but all the people who had become part of their story. And this, he added, is what Emma meant when she said I needed more noise in my life. She knew that love is never quiet, it echoes, it multiplies, it fills every empty space. The gathering continued into the evening, not just a celebration but a testament to the power of love to transform lives. Each person there carried a piece of the lesson that family is both a gift and a choice, that love multiplies when shared, and that the greatest wealth lies not in what we possess, but in what we give away. As night fell and stars appeared above the mansion, the Reynolds family story stood as a beacon of hope, proof that even in the darkest times, love could light the way forward. Their journey from broken souls to healing hearts had become more than just their story. It had become a promise that love in all its forms would always find a way to multiply. Dear valued viewers, if this story touched your heart and resonated with you, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to hear your own experiences and reflections on family, love, and redemption. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to support our team and stay updated with more meaningful stories that celebrate the human spirit. Every subscription helps us continue creating content that matters. Share this video with your friends and family. Sometimes the right story at the right time can make all the difference in someone's life. If you enjoyed this journey, please hit the like button. Your support encourages us to keep bringing you stories that remind us of what truly matters in life. Thank you for being part of our storytelling community.